Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The rain had been falling for hours when the old truck finally rolled to a stop. The headlights cut through the fog, briefly illuminating the narrow, winding road that led deeper into the forest. The air outside was thick with mist, clinging to the trees and the ground. A soft, distant rumble of thunder echoed through the sky, a warning of more to come. Max glanced at the lodge ahead, its silhouette barely visible through the rain. The roof sagged under the weight of years, and the walls, once painted a bright shade of green, had faded into a dull, weathered gray. A faint flicker of light shone through one of the windows, beckoning him to come inside, to seek warmth and shelter from the storm. He grabbed his bag from the back of the truck and pulled up the collar of his jacket, bracing himself against the cold. The sound of the rain was almost deafening, hitting the ground with a rhythmic patter that blended with the occasional crack of thunder. The road was slick, the dirt muddy from the relentless downpour, and the air smelled of wet earth and pine. Max had heard about the lodge from an old friend, someone who had stayed there years ago. It was a quiet place, a retreat for those who needed to escape from the world. A perfect spot to get away from the chaos of life, to think, to reflect. At least that's what he had been told. The path to the lodge was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the cabin's windows and the flickering flame of a campfire that burned just outside the entrance. The warmth from the fire made the air around it feel almost tangible, like a curtain that separated the outside world from the haven within. As he neared the lodge, Max could hear the low crackle of the fire, the sound of branches snapping as the flames devoured the dry wood. The lodge itself loomed like a giant shadow in the fog, its structure old and creaky, like something out of a forgotten time. He reached the front porch and paused for a moment, his fingers brushing against the cold metal of the door handle. The rain had soaked through his clothes, and the chill in the air seeped deep into his bones. The door creaked open before he could knock. "Come in, come in." A voice, gruff but welcoming, echoed from inside. Max stepped into the warmth, shaking the water from his clothes as he closed the door behind him. The lodge's interior was dimly lit, the soft golden glow of the fire casting long shadows across the room. The walls were lined with old wooden beams, the kind that seemed to have been there for centuries, and the furniture was mismatched but comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, the fire dancing and crackling in the hearth. Several chairs were arranged around it, inviting anyone who entered to sit and relax. An older man with graying hair and a thick beard looked up from his seat by the fire. His eyes were sharp, yet kind, and he gave Max a warm smile. "I wasn't sure when you'd arrive. The storm's a bit of a menace tonight, isn't it?" he said, his voice deep and comforting. Max nodded, still catching his breath from the walk. "Yeah, the weather out there's pretty bad. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it." The man chuckled, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. "Well, you've made it now. Get yourself settled. I'll get you something hot to drink." Max set his bag down beside the chair and took a seat, finally able to relax. The warmth from the fire soaked into his skin, and he could feel the tension in his muscles begin to loosen. The smell of something sweet, a herbal tea or perhaps something stronger, drifted from the kitchen. The storm outside intensified, the wind howling through the trees, sending the rain against the windows in violent bursts. The crackling of the fire was the only other sound in the room, a comforting and familiar noise. The older man returned with a steaming mug in his hands, offering it to Max. "There's nothing like a hot drink after being out in that weather," he said, his smile never wavering. "What brings you up here, if you don't mind me asking?" Max took the mug gratefully, savoring the warmth that spread through his chest as he took a sip. It was sweet and rich, with an unfamiliar flavor that he couldn't quite place. "I needed some time away," Max replied, his voice quieter than he expected. "Just needed to clear my head." The man nodded thoughtfully, sitting back down in his chair. "I can understand that. A lot of folks come here for the same reason. This place has a way of getting into your mind, helping you find peace." Max glanced around the room, taking in the old photographs that lined the walls, the strange trinkets and curios scattered about. The place had an air of timelessness about it, like it had been here long before Max arrived, and might still be here long after he left. But there was something about the air tonight that felt off. The wind outside wasn't just the wind. The way it seemed to whisper through the trees, bending the branches, almost like it was calling. Max shook his head, trying to push the thought aside. It was just the storm playing tricks on his mind. "I'm sure it'll be just what I need," Max said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for letting me stay." The older man nodded again, his eyes glinting slightly in the firelight. "Don't mention it. You'll find that this place has a way of showing you what you need to see, whether you want to or not. Max furrowed his brow but said nothing, too tired to question the man's cryptic tone. Instead, he leaned back, letting the warmth of the fire pull him into a quiet, comfortable silence. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the lodge, the fire burned bright, its flickering flames casting long shadows on the walls. The fire crackled in the hearth, its flames licking the edges of the logs, sending sparks into the darkened air. Max took another sip from the mug, feeling the warmth seep into his bones. His eyelids were heavy, the exhaustion from his long drive creeping in. The room was peaceful, too peaceful. The storm raged outside, but inside the lodge, it was as if time had slowed, each second stretching longer, heavier. The old man, whose name Max hadn't yet learned, settled back into his chair with a contented sigh. He had placed his mug down beside him, his hands now folded across his chest. His gaze remained fixed on the fire, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them like a thread, fragile yet unbroken. Max tried to shake off the feeling that the lodge was watching him, waiting for him to say something more. Anything more. But the weight in the air held him in place. Every now and then, the wind outside would howl louder, a chilling gust that rattled the windows, making the walls groan in protest. But the lodge itself seemed to stand strong, like it had endured this storm for centuries. "What's this place like?" Max finally asked, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "I mean, really, how long has it been here?" The old man turned his head slowly, eyes narrowing in the dim light, the shadows beneath them deepening. For a moment, Max felt like he had said something wrong, that the question itself had opened some sort of door. "Oh, it's been here for a long time," the man said slowly, his voice almost a whisper. "Older than most people realize. Some say the forest is what holds it together. Others say it's something else entirely." Max felt a chill run down his spine. The fire crackled loudly as if on cue, breaking the tension for a moment. He glanced around the room, searching for something to anchor his thoughts. The walls were lined with old books and mementos, rusted lanterns, faded paintings, strange trinkets that he couldn't quite place. "You must have heard the stories," the old man continued, his tone lighter now, as if he was testing Max. "People talk. People who come here, especially when the weather's like this." He paused as if searching for the right words. "There are some things in the forest that, well, they don't like it when you're too close to the lodge. And there are others who say that the lodge itself isn't just a building. It's a place where things gather." Max shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The words seemed harmless enough, but there was an undercurrent to them, something that stirred unease deep in his chest. His hand tightened around the mug, his fingers growing cold despite the warmth of the drink. "What do you mean, things gather?" The old man's gaze flickered to the window, where the shadows outside seemed to dance unnaturally in the rain. The storm outside seemed to intensify by the minute, the wind now screeching against the trees like a chorus of whispers. "It's hard to explain." The man's voice softened. "You'll see in time. The forest has a way of revealing things you might not want to know." Max was about to ask more, but something made him stop. A distant sound, a creak or a groan, echoed from somewhere deep within the lodge. It wasn't the wind. It was the lodge itself, shifting, settling, or perhaps something else entirely. The older man didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he did, but he didn't acknowledge it. Instead, he stood slowly, his joints creaking with age, and moved toward a large, worn cabinet by the wall. The door opened with a quiet squeal, and the old man rummaged inside, his back turned to Max. Max's eyes drifted back to the fire, but his mind wandered, replaying the old man's words. "Things gather." The phrase kept looping in his thoughts, feeding his curiosity and his growing unease. His fingers twitched, a subtle nervousness stirring in him. He had come here for peace, to escape the noise of his life, but the lodge seemed to be doing the opposite. Its quiet was unnerving, heavy with secrets. Then he heard it again, the soft creaking sound, closer this time. It came from above, from the upper floors of the lodge, faint but distinct. Max tried to dismiss it as the house settling, but there was something wrong about the way it sounded. Like the weight of someone, or something, moving quietly overhead. The old man returned, holding a small wooden box. It was intricately carved, the design of twisting vines and strange symbols etched into the surface. The box seemed out of place in the otherwise rustic, worn interior of the lodge. It gleamed faintly in the firelight, its wood untouched by age. "Here," the old man said, holding the box out to Max. "This is for you. You'll need it." Max blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in the man's demeanor. "What is it?" "A gift," the old man replied, his voice taking on a strange, almost cryptic tone. "It's part of the lodge's protection. Keep it with you, especially tonight. The storm is only the beginning." Max hesitated, staring at the box. It felt too heavy for its size, as though it contained more than just wood. Something inside shifted ever so slightly, but he couldn't tell what. "Why do I need it?" Max asked, his voice shaking slightly despite himself. "You'll understand soon enough." The old man's eyes were steady, his expression unreadable. "Just don't open it until you're ready to know." Max felt an unsettling urge to refuse to leave the box behind, but something inside him pushed him forward. He took the box, the smooth surface cool against his palm. As his fingers wrapped around it, the air seemed to grow colder, and the shadows in the room deepened, stretching just a bit farther than they should. The wind outside picked up again, the storm howling with a new intensity, and the fire flickered, casting odd shapes and dancing figures on the walls. For a moment, Max could have sworn he saw something move just at the edge of the flame's light, a shadow that wasn't his own. He quickly averted his gaze and stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. The lodge felt different now, its warmth and safety slipping away, replaced by a subtle but undeniable sense of foreboding. The old man didn't seem to notice his discomfort. Instead, he gave a final, slow nod. "Rest for now. Tomorrow you'll see the forest for what it truly is, and you'll understand why you came here." Max could only nod, the weight of the box in his hands suddenly feeling much heavier than before. He turned, heading toward the stairs that led to the guest rooms. The stairs creaked beneath his weight as he ascended, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The storm outside raged on, but Max's mind was elsewhere, lost in the strange words of the old man, in the mysterious box he now carried, and in the uneasy feeling that this was only the beginning of something far darker. Max couldn't shake the sensation that the lodge was alive. The air felt thick, as if it was filled with the weight of unspoken things, things that had been hiding for far longer than he could possibly understand. The box, still clutched in his hands, seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, as if it knew something he didn't. He reached the top of the stairs, the old wood groaning under his weight, the sound echoing through the silence of the lodge. The hallway stretched before him, dimly lit by lanterns hanging on the walls. The rooms to either side were closed off, their doors standing like silent sentinels, their outlines distorted in the flickering light. Each room seemed to hold its own secret, as though they were all waiting for him to uncover something within. The walls here were different, older, more worn, like they had absorbed the very history of the place, soaked in the whispers and footsteps of the people who had stayed before him. He shuddered and looked over his shoulder, but the hallway behind him was empty, the only sound the steady drip of rain against the window pane. Max walked slowly down the hall, his boots heavy on the creaky wooden floorboards. He passed room after room, but none of them felt inviting. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as if someone, or something, was watching him from within one of those rooms. But when he turned to look, the doors were empty, the windows sealed tight against the storm. Finally, he came to a door at the end of the hall. This room, unlike the others, was slightly ajar, as though someone had forgotten to close it all the way. A faint light flickered from within, casting a pale glow beneath the door. Max felt an odd compulsion to go inside, his fingers tightening around the box in his hands. He pushed the door open, the hinges protesting with a low groan, and stepped inside. The room was small, almost cramped. The furnishings were simple, just a bed, a worn dresser, and a single armchair beside the window. The curtains were drawn, but the pale light from outside seeped through the cracks, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air. The firelight from below flickered up, casting strange shadows against the walls. But it wasn't the room that caught Max's attention. It was the floor. The floorboards, old and cracked, seemed to have shifted over time. There were gaps between the wood, revealing a dark space beneath, as though the floor had been hollowed out. He crouched down, his heart beating faster now, his fingers instinctively gripping the box tighter. A faint smell of mildew and earth wafted from the gap. The shadows beneath the floor seemed deeper here, like something was waiting in the dark, just out of sight. Max leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat, as the low murmur of the wind outside seemed to rise in pitch, almost as if it were speaking to him. It was then that he heard it. A soft scraping sound, faint but distinct, coming from beneath the floorboards. Max froze, his pulse racing. His hand shot out, gripping the edge of the floorboard, and he lifted it with trembling fingers. A gust of cold air shot up from the hole beneath, and Max recoiled instinctively, almost dropping the box. But something caught his eye, a dark shape that flickered beneath the floor, moving in the shadows. His heart hammered in his chest as he squinted, trying to make sense of it, but the darkness below was too thick, too oppressive. He leaned down again, pulling the floorboard up even further, his breath shallow, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. That's when he saw it, a small old chest nestled deep within the gap. Its wood was ancient, its surface scarred and worn, like it had been down there for centuries. The faintest glimmer of metal peeked from the chest's corners, something that had once been shiny, but now tarnished with age. Max felt a pull, a strange magnetic force drawing him closer. But he hesitated, his mind racing. He had already opened the box given to him by the old man, and now here was another hidden chest, buried beneath the very floor of the lodge. There was no logical explanation for any of this. But then, just as he was about to reach in and touch it, a voice whispered, so faint it was almost imperceptible. "Don't." Max's breath caught in his throat. He spun around, looking for the source of the voice, but the room was empty. No one was there. He pressed his hand to his chest, feeling the thudding of his heart, the sudden rush of adrenaline. He swallowed hard. "I'm hearing things," he told himself. "It's the storm. The wind playing tricks on me." But the feeling of being watched, didn't go away. It only grew stronger. Max pushed himself away from the floor, the chest still sitting there beneath the floorboards, taunting him. He could still feel its presence like a heavy weight pressing down on him. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make a decision. Slowly, he backed away from the hole, taking the box with him. As he did, he heard the soft scraping sound again. It came from beneath the floor, but this time it was closer, like something, or someone, was moving in the dark. Max stood frozen, his hands shaking as he glanced around the room. The shadows were thicker now, stretching longer, and the air felt heavy, suffocating. It was almost as if the lodge was drawing in the very breath of the storm outside. Then, with a violent shudder, the floorboards creaked once more, louder this time. The scraping sound was no longer distant. It was right beneath his feet, coming from the very floor that had once seemed solid and safe. The voice from before returned, a mere whisper against the storm's roar. "Leave. Now." Max didn't hesitate this time. He turned and bolted for the door, his heart pounding in his chest, the weight of the box pulling at his hand. He could feel the air behind him shift, as if something was following, but when he dared to look back, the room was empty, the floorboard once again sealed. He didn't stop running until he was back in the hallway, the oppressive air of the room still clinging to him. He slammed the door behind him, his breath ragged, his chest tight with panic. But even in the hallway, he could still feel the weight of the silence, still hear the faint whispers beneath the floor as though they were following him. Max didn't know what was worse, the feeling of being watched or the certainty that he was no longer alone in the lodge. Max's pulse raced as he stood in the dim hallway, his breath still coming in shallow gasps. The door to the small room, where the strange chest had been hidden beneath the floor, loomed behind him. His fingers clenched around the box, its weight now a constant reminder of what he had uncovered, or rather what he hadn't yet uncovered. The wind outside howled louder, rattling the old windows in their frames. The storm, relentless and unforgiving, seemed to mirror the turmoil in Max's mind. Every shadow in the hall appeared to stretch and shift, as if something unseen was lurking just beyond the edge of his vision. The fire downstairs crackled faintly, but it offered no comfort now, only a distant, flickering light that felt too far removed from the growing darkness inside him. He knew he couldn't stay here forever, trapped in this unsettling place, haunted by the unknown. But every instinct screamed at him to leave. Leave now. Yet there was something inside him, something deep and primal, that refused to abandon his search. What was it about this place? What was the old man hiding? What was beneath the floor? The questions gnawed at him, becoming louder and more insistent with each passing second. Max finally took a deep breath and forced himself to move. He made his way down the hall, away from the room where the strange chest waited. His boots thudded softly against the wooden floor, but each step seemed to echo through the lodge, louder and louder, until the sound of his own footsteps became unbearable. He passed the other rooms, each of them dark and silent, but something had changed. The once comforting darkness now felt oppressive. The shadows no longer hid in corners. They seemed to press against him, thick and suffocating, like they were closing in, waiting for him to make a mistake. He glanced over his shoulder. For a moment, it felt as though something was following him, a presence just behind him, moving in perfect synchrony with his every step. Max's heart leaped into his throat, but when he turned, there was nothing there. The hall stretched out, empty and silent. Get a grip, Max thought, his pulse quickening. Is the storm, the isolation, the stories? But deep down, he knew it wasn't just his imagination. He wasn't alone. He never had been. He arrived at the stairs and hesitated for a moment before heading down. The groaning of the old wood beneath his feet felt exaggerated now, like every step was a warning. His hand gripped the railing tightly, the rough surface biting into his skin as if it were trying to pull him back into the darkened hall above. He could feel the weight of the box at his side, as though it had grown heavier with each step he took. As he descended, a sudden cold draft swept through the lodge, biting at his skin, and the faint murmur of someone, whispered in the back of his mind. "Don't go back down there. Don't go near the fire." Max froze mid-step, his heart hammering in his chest. The voice had come from inside his head, soft, low, and yet unmistakable. It wasn't a voice that had spoken out loud. It was a voice that had slithered through his thoughts, a warning born of something dark, something ancient. He looked down the stairs toward the warmth of the fire below, but all he saw was darkness. The firelight was gone. It was as if it had been snuffed out in an instant, leaving nothing but cold, empty shadows. His throat tightened. He couldn't go back to that room, couldn't go back to the fire, but he couldn't leave either. There was something in the air, a strange magnetic pull that tugged him deeper into the lodge, into the shadows where things did not quite belong. Max's fingers tightened around the box again, the wood smooth and cool beneath his hand. The air around him felt thicker now, like a fog had crept in, heavy and wet, wrapping itself around him. The shadows at the foot of the stairs seemed to grow, darkening and twisting, stretching further out into the hall. Suddenly, the sound of a door creaking open behind him caught his attention. Max spun around, his heart pounding. The door at the top of the stairs, the one that led to the small room, was ajar again, just slightly, as if it had never been closed. But now it was no longer empty. The faintest silhouette could be seen, barely a shape, standing in the doorway. The figure was tall, but its features were obscured in the darkness, like a shadow too deep to discern. Max's breath hitched in his throat. His eyes locked on the shape as it slowly stepped forward, its movements jerky, almost unnatural. The figure seemed to glide through the air, its feet never quite touching the ground. Max's mind screamed at him to move, to run. But his legs were frozen, locked in place, unwilling or unable to obey. The figure took another step forward, and the dim light from below flickered again, casting just enough light to reveal what stood in the doorway. It was a woman. Her face was pale, almost translucent, with dark circles beneath her eyes. Her hair hung in wet strands clinging to her face, and her clothes, tattered and torn, were soaked through as though she had been outside in the storm for far too long. But what was most disturbing were her eyes. They were wide and vacant, as though she was searching for something, or someone, but her gaze never seemed to quite focus on anything. The moment their eyes met, Max felt an icy chill creep up his spine. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound escaped. The woman stepped forward again, her footfall soft but deliberate, and just before she could step into the light, a deafening crack of thunder split the air. The figure vanished. Max staggered backward, his breath coming fast, his hands shaking. His legs threatened to give way beneath him, and the box in his hand felt like it might slip through his fingers at any moment. But when he looked back toward the stairs, the hallway was empty. Had he imagined it? His chest heaved, the air suddenly feeling too thin, too tight. He turned his gaze upward, back toward the small room where he had seen the chest beneath the floorboards. A shiver crawled up his spine, and for the first time since arriving at the lodge, he wished he had never come. Yet even as the thought crossed his mind, he knew he wouldn't leave, not yet. There was something here, something that couldn't be ignored, something that was waiting for him to find it. The storm outside howled louder, shaking the lodge with a force that made the walls tremble. And in that moment, Max understood. The lodge wasn't just a shelter from the storm. It was a trap. Max's mind raced, his thoughts a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and disbelief. The woman, was she real? The strange figure had appeared so suddenly, and when the thunder cracked, she was gone, as if swallowed by the storm itself. The pulse of fear that gripped him wouldn't let go. It was like a weight in his chest, pressing against him, suffocating him with the realization that the lodge wasn't just a place of respite. It was a place where someone, was waiting, watching. He stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, trying to steady his breathing. The silence that followed the storm's fury felt almost unnatural, a quiet that crawled beneath his skin. The wind had died down outside, but the atmosphere inside the lodge had thickened, the air heavy with something Max couldn't name. The box in his hands felt heavier now. The faint, subtle pulse of energy that had drawn his attention earlier had intensified, as if the box itself was alive, reacting to the presence of something or someone else in the house. He could feel it pressing against his palm, the wood now warm and slightly vibrating. It was as though the box knew what had happened, as though it was aware of the presence in the hallway. Max swallowed hard, his throat dry. The hallway seemed longer than before, darker. The shadows had grown thicker, almost taking on a form of their own, curling along the edges of the walls, moving like tendrils reaching out to him. The woman's face flashed in his mind again, the vacant eyes, the pallor of her skin. What had she been searching for? Why had she appeared to him? With a sudden, overwhelming urge, Max turned and hurried back toward the stairs. The strange room, the one with the chest beneath the floorboards, beckoned him. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important there, something that might explain what was happening or at the very least provide some kind of answer. He climbed the stairs quickly, his heart hammering in his chest, the thudding of his boots echoing through the empty lodge. As he passed the darkened rooms, he noticed something strange. Each door that lined the hallway seemed to be open, just slightly. It was as if they had been waiting for him to pass, as if the lodge itself was drawing him in, trying to push him toward the truth. Max reached the room where the floorboards had shifted, the gap where the chest had been hidden. The door creaked as he pushed it open, but this time he wasn't greeted by silence. The air inside the room was thick with something darker, something that felt wrong. He stepped inside, his eyes immediately drawn to the floor, to the hole where the chest had once been. The floorboards were still lifted, but the chest was gone. His heart skipped a beat. Gone? The chest had been right there, he had seen it with his own eyes. The old, ancient chest, tucked away beneath the floor, its presence lingering in the back of his mind like an uninvited guest. But now there was nothing. Just the dark, yawning hole in the floor, leading down into the shadows below. Max knelt, his fingers brushing against the edges of the hole. The wood around it felt cold to the touch, colder than it had been before. He reached inside, but there was nothing there, no sign of the chest. His breath quickened as he pulled his hand back, suddenly feeling as though the very floor beneath him had shifted, as if the room itself was moving, closing in around him. A soft sound from behind him made him freeze. The door had closed, quietly as if something, had just entered the room with him. Max turned quickly, but the room was empty. The door had clicked shut, but there was no one there. No figure, no shadow, nothing but the dim, flickering light from the hallway and the cold, oppressive air that seemed to press in from every corner of the room. And then the whispering started. It was faint at first, like the rustling of leaves in a distant forest, too soft to catch with the ear. But the sound grew slowly at first until it was unmistakable, a low murmur, a chorus of voices blending together in a language Max couldn't understand. The whisper seemed to come from everywhere, as though the very walls of the lodge were speaking, or perhaps something deeper within. Max's heart raced. He felt the blood drain from his face as the temperature in the room dropped, the cold creeping into his bones, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. The box in his hands thrummed again, stronger now, its pulse a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Max glanced down at it, his fingers trembling as he held it closer. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, as if the voices were urging him to do something he didn't understand. He could hear the words now, not in the language of the lodge, but in his own mind, clearer than ever before. Open it. Max hesitated, his breath catching in his throat. Open it. The voice was stronger now, pressing against his mind, urging him to obey. Open it now. It was too much. His mind reeled with the intensity of the command, the overwhelming force of the words. His fingers shook violently as he unlatched the small clasp on the box. The moment the lid opened, the voices stopped. The air went still. Everything went silent. Max stared into the box. Inside there was nothing. Empty space. A void. No trinkets, no treasures, no strange artifact waiting to be uncovered. Just emptiness. And yet, something moved within the void. A faint shimmer, a ripple in the air that Max couldn't quite comprehend. The room around him seemed to darken, as if the very shadows were being drawn toward the box, pooling around it, thickening the air. The temperature dropped again, and Max could see his breath fogging in the air, freezing in front of him. His hands were numb now, his whole body trembling. Then the whispers started again, but this time they were different. The voices were not urging him to open the box. No, they were threatening him. You shouldn't have opened it. Max's heart raced as the darkness in the room seemed to deepen. The whispers became sharper, more insistent, their words now clear, but full of anger and dread. You are not welcome here. The shadows began to crawl along the floor, rising up toward him like living things, stretching, twisting, pulling at the edges of his consciousness. Max slammed the lid of the box shut, but the voices didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder, more forceful, as if the box had unlocked something ancient and dangerous within the lodge. Max stumbled back, his feet slipping on the cold floor, but the shadows followed him, pressing in from every side. The room seemed to be alive, its very walls closing in around him. And in the distance, he heard something else, a soft sound like footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway. Max didn't wait to see who, or what, was coming. He turned and bolted for the door, but as he reached for the handle, the whispers reached a crescendo. It's too late. The door slammed shut in front of him. Max slammed his shoulder into the door, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as though the wood had become one with the walls, solid, immovable, as if the lodge itself had locked him in. His breath came in shallow bursts, his chest tight as the pressure in the room increased. The shadows had thickened around him, crawling like ink spilled over a surface, pooling in every corner, rising up from the floor, slowly closing in. The whispers had become more than just words now. They were feelings. Anger, sorrow, desperation. Each voice carried an emotion, an urgency that pressed against him from all sides. His hands trembled as he fumbled with the door handle again, trying to escape, but the cold, damp wood resisted him, mocking his efforts. His pulse throbbed in his ears, drowning out everything except the distant, rhythmic thudding of his heart. You shouldn't have opened it. The words echoed through his mind, louder this time, reverberating off the walls, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from beneath the very ground. Max's head spun, the darkness in the room swirling, dancing with a life of its own. His vision blurred as his mind tried to grasp what was happening. He knew he had to get out of here, he had to escape, but the lodge wouldn't let him. It wouldn't let him leave. Suddenly the whisper stopped. The absence of sound was more deafening than the clamor had been. The room fell into a crushing, suffocating silence. Max dared to turn around. His eyes darted to the floor, then to the walls, but everything was still, too still. The shadows, though thick and oppressive, had retreated. The faint glow from the hallway outside flickered through the cracks beneath the door, casting long, eerie shadows that stretched across the floor. And then he saw it. A figure. It was standing in the corner of the room, partially obscured by the darkness, its shape barely discernible. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and its limbs were stretched in a way that seemed wrong, too long, too angular. The figure's features were hidden in the shadows, but Max could feel its eyes on him, burning into his skin with an intensity that made his breath catch. A cold shiver ran down his spine. It's here. Max's throat closed, the weight of the presence in the room pressing against his chest, choking him. He couldn't look away. Something about the figure, something about the way it stood there, unmoving, silent, was both terrifying and strangely familiar. He opened his mouth to shout, to scream for help, but no sound came out. His voice had been stolen, like the air around him had been drained, leaving only emptiness. The figure shifted slightly, and Max felt a twinge of terror deep in his gut. It was moving closer. Then, without warning, the shadows lunged. They weren't just shadows, they were something else. Dark, viscous, almost liquid in their movement, they surged forward, wrapping themselves around his legs, his waist, pulling him downward. Max gasped in shock, his body suddenly overwhelmed by the cold, the dampness, the suffocating pressure that seemed to come from all directions. He tried to pull away, but the shadows clung to him, their touch like icy fingers sliding under his skin. His legs grew heavy, as if the weight of the lodge itself was pressing down on him, forcing him to the ground. He could feel the cold creeping into his bones, numbing him, turning his muscles stiff and unresponsive. The figure in the corner took a step forward, its movement slow, deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. Max's heart hammered in his chest, the sound pounding in his ears. He tried to push himself up, but the shadows had him pinned to the floor now, like ropes pulling him deeper into the earth itself. A voice, not from the figure but from within his own mind, whispered, "You open the door. You let it in." Max's breath hitched as the air grew colder, a biting, suffocating cold that made him want to scream, but no sound escaped. His vision was blurred, his surroundings spinning as the shadows tightened around him, their dark tendrils slithering up his arms, his chest, pulling him into the depths of the room, into the depths of the lodge. The figure's shape grew clearer, and Max saw it. Long, twisted limbs, jagged, angular features, and eyes that burned with an unnatural, cold light. There was no face, no mouth, just eyes, empty black pits that seemed to devour the light, drawing everything into them. The whispers returned, louder now, a cacophony of voices swirling together, angry voices, voices of people lost, trapped, perhaps like him. They weren't words anymore, just raw emotions, fear, rage, desperation, and they were all directed at him. You shouldn't have come. You should have stayed away. Now you're ours. Max tried to close his eyes, tried to block out the sound, but the weight of the presence around him was too much. His fingers clenched around the box in his hand, but the wood had grown warm, hot even, and its pulse had become erratic, like a heartbeat that was no longer in sync with his own. He could feel it. It was inside the box now. Whatever was inside the box, whatever had been locked away, was waking up. The figure took another step forward, its head tilting slightly as if it was examining him, studying him, savoring the moment. And then it spoke, not with words but with a voice that was felt, a voice that echoed inside his head, deep and ancient, like a presence beyond time. You open the door, but you don't understand. Max's body felt as though it were being crushed, pulled apart by the weight of the voices and shadows. The cold was unbearable now, seeping into every inch of his body, stealing his warmth. His limbs were numb, his chest constricting as though the very air had been stolen from him. You open the door. And now you will stay. The words cut through his mind like a knife, and with the last of his strength, he struggled against the shadows that held him. His fingers clutched the box tighter, and in that instant he felt it, the pulse of energy surging inside, a violent wave that threatened to tear him apart. And then the box exploded. Max screamed, but it was a silent scream. His mouth opened wide, but the sound was swallowed by the force of the blast. The room around him blurred, the shadows swirling into a vortex as the energy from the box erupted outward in a wave of light and darkness. The figure in the corner let out a low, guttural sound, like a growl of pain, before it was consumed by the explosion of light. Max's body was thrown backward by the force, and for a moment, he was suspended in midair, weightless, as if the laws of gravity had ceased to exist. The room, the shadows, the figure, all of it melted away into pure white light, a blinding burst that engulfed him. Then, just as suddenly, everything went dark. When Max opened his eyes, he wasn't sure how much time had passed. His body was still trembling, but not from cold this time. No, it was something deeper, a tremor that shook him from the inside out. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been twisted, altered, and he was just now beginning to regain his bearings. His chest heaved with ragged breaths, but the air around him felt different, heavier, thicker, almost suffocating. He was no longer in the room. In fact, he wasn't even sure he was still in the lodge. His surroundings were too empty. The familiar, oppressive shadows had dissipated, leaving him in a vast, featureless void. It was as if the world itself had collapsed into nothingness, leaving only the sensation of his body, alone, fragile, adrift. Max tried to push himself up, but the ground beneath him felt soft, almost like sand, shifting with every move. His fingers scraped against the surface, but there was no resistance, no solidity, just emptiness. His eyes darted around the space, but there was nothing to focus on, no landmarks, no walls, no ceiling. It was as though he had been dropped into a void with no clear beginning or end. Was this, he thought, death? His pulse quickened, the panic rising once more in his chest, but something made him stop. A soft pull, like a whisper against his skin, calmed him, anchored him. It wasn't the oppressive force of the shadows from the lodge, but something different, something that felt more familiar. Max slowly got to his feet, his legs shaky as if they hadn't borne weight in years. His senses were heightened, every small movement in the air sending ripples through the emptiness. His heart raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening, but all he could hear now was a low hum, a deep, resonating sound that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. He turned, instinctively scanning the void for any sign of movement. It wasn't just the quiet that unnerved him, it was the lack of sound, the absence of everything. No wind, no rain, no fire crackling. Just the hum. And then he saw it. A figure, far in the distance, just at the edge of his vision. It was indistinct at first, a shadow among shadows, but it was moving, drawing closer, its form becoming more defined as it approached. Max's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't the same as before. It wasn't the monstrous shape from the lodge, nor was it the woman from the hallway. No, this figure was different. It was taller than any human he'd ever seen, draped in a cloak that billowed like smoke, its edges dissolving into the air. Its face, however, was the most disturbing. It was pale, unnervingly smooth, like a mask with no features. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just the hollow, white expanse of a blank face. The figure continued to move toward him, its feet never touching the ground, hovering just above the shifting surface. Max's body tensed instinctively, a primal fear pushing him backward, but his legs were unresponsive, frozen in place. The figure halted several feet away from him. And just as Max thought he couldn't bear the silence any longer, a voice, deep, resonant, and calm, echoed through the void. "You've come far, Max," it said, its tone impossibly soothing, but laced with an unsettling calm. "Farther than most who've come before you." Max swallowed, his throat dry. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the words caught in his chest. His heart pounded, a sense of unease flooding him, washing over every inch of his being. How could this being know his name? How could it know anything about him? "Who are you?" Max managed to ask, his voice hoarse, unsure if the question even mattered. The figure's blank face shifted slightly, as if acknowledging the question, though it did not speak. Instead, it slowly extended one long, impossibly thin arm, pointing toward Max. The air around it shimmered with an unnatural energy, and Max instinctively took a step back, though he had nowhere to go. "I am not what you think," the figure replied, its voice now somehow both inside his mind and in the air around him. "I am not from the world you know. I exist between. In the spaces where your world ends and where something else begins. Something older." Max felt a sudden, cold shiver crawl down his spine as the figure's words washed over him, their meaning slowly beginning to sink in. It was a being outside of time, outside of the lodge, outside of everything he understood. But it wasn't just any entity, it was something that had been waiting for him. "You're the one who was in the lodge," Max whispered, the words finally pushing past his lips, trembling with the weight of the truth. You've been watching me." The figure's motionless face tilted slightly as though considering the statement. "Yes," it said. "I have watched, and I have waited. But you were never meant to open the box." Max's blood ran cold at the mention of the box. He could feel the cold weight of it still in his hand, even though he wasn't holding it anymore. He looked down, and to his horror, he realized he could feel its presence in the air, lingering like a dark promise waiting to be fulfilled. "You were always meant to open it," the figure continued, its voice carrying a deeper tone now. "The box was a key to the path that leads to this place, the place where the threads of the world begin to unravel." Max felt the ground shift beneath him. The void seemed to deepen, the hum vibrating through his chest, echoing with the figure's words. He could feel the reality of the place around him, bending and warping, like it was stretching and contorting, as if the very air itself was shifting into something new. "What happens now?" Max asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, his fear now giving way to an uneasy curiosity. He had already opened the box. There was no turning back. Whatever was coming, he had already set it into motion. The figure's face remained eerily smooth and blank, but its voice resonated deeply. "Now you must understand," it said, "what you have unleashed, what you have become a part of." The ground beneath Max's feet began to tremble. The air grew heavier, thicker, and the hum that had filled the void grew louder, until it was deafening. Max couldn't move, couldn't even breathe properly, as if the weight of the void itself was pressing down on him, suffocating him. "You've stepped beyond the veil, Max," the figure continued, its words filled with an ancient, overwhelming power. "There are no more boundaries, no more rules. The lodge was only a doorway, a threshold, and now you are here. And this is where everything ends." Max's chest tightened, and the ground beneath him began to crack, the rift spreading outward like a spider's web. The air shimmered, and the darkness swirled around him, thickening with a force he couldn't understand. But just as the world began to collapse inward, just as he felt himself being drawn into the void, the figure's voice rang out again, clearer this time, resonating with a finality that stopped him cold. "Do you understand now, Max? This is the end of one world and the beginning of another. Your world is no longer the one you knew." And then, with a final breath, everything went black. Max's consciousness flickered, fading in and out like a dying ember, until, slowly, the darkness gave way to light. It wasn't the blinding white that had come before. No, this was a strange, muted glow that seemed to pulse with a rhythm, as if the very air itself was alive, breathing with an energy that wasn't of this world. It was soft but constant, wrapping around him like an unseen tide, pulling him into its flow. His senses returned one by one, the fog in his mind lifting as the weight in his chest slowly began to ease. The ground under his feet felt solid once again, real. But it was nothing like the lodge. No creaky floors or musty air. This place was smooth, almost sterile, with an unnatural stillness that seemed to hold its breath. The hum had faded, replaced by an eerie, unsettling silence that pressed in on him from all sides. Max stood, unsteady on his feet, his arms hanging loosely at his sides. He took a deep breath, his lungs filling with air that didn't feel right, didn't belong. It smelled faintly of damp stone, of something ancient and forgotten. His body ached like he had been pulled through a rift, twisted and bent, then dropped back into the world. But his head was clearer now. The fog in his thoughts had lifted. He understood. The box, the figure, the whispers, they weren't just dreams or tricks of the mind. They had all led him here. He slowly looked around, and that was when he saw it, the world he had entered. It wasn't a physical space, not in the way he was used to understanding it. It wasn't a room, a house, or even a landscape. It was something other. He was standing on what could only be described as an infinite expanse, stretching out before him in every direction. The ground beneath him was smooth, black, and slick like polished obsidian, but it was more than that. It seemed to ripple, shifting ever so slightly with each step he took. It was like he was standing on a surface that was alive, pulsing with some strange energy, and as he moved, the ground didn't just move with him, it seemed to respond. Far in the distance, towering structures loomed, but not in a way that suggested they were built by human hands. They were more like manifestations. Shadows given form, reaching high into the sky, their shapes jagged and ever-changing, twisting in impossible angles. Some stretched to heights that seemed to defy physics, their tops lost in the swirling mist that hung in the air, as if the sky above had been torn open. There was no sun, no moon, just a sickly, unnatural glow that bathed everything in a cold, ghostly light. Max took a step forward, his legs stiff and uncertain, but the moment his foot touched the surface, the ground beneath him seemed to ripple again. The sky overhead flickered with erratic bursts of energy, lightning-like flashes that briefly illuminated the vast, endless void around him. The flashes revealed glimpses of things, horrible, twisted shapes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Something stirred in the air. A low sound, like the rustling of pages in a forgotten tome, grew louder. It wasn't wind and it wasn't rain. It was the sound of the space itself moving, of the very fabric of reality stretching, bending, contorting. And then, in the distance, he heard a voice. Not one that spoke to him directly, but one that seemed to resonate from the very depths of the place, as though the words were coming from the void itself. It was low, deep, and heavy with age. "You have crossed the threshold, Max." Max's breath caught in his throat. The voice, it sounded like the same entity, the same being from before. But this time the voice was clearer, sharper, and it seemed to fill the space, vibrating through his bones. "You have opened the door. You have taken the first step into the dark." Max's head spun. His pulse quickened, and he instinctively reached for the box still gripped tightly in his hand, even though it had long since ceased to hold any physical presence. It was as if the box had become part of him, an extension of his body, his soul. The weight of it was there, but when he looked down, he saw only air. "What is this place?" he finally found the courage to ask, his voice hoarse and weak. The voice responded immediately, its tone filled with a strange, detached sorrow. "This is beyond the world you knew, beyond the limits of time, space, and thought. It is the place where all things converge, where all things end and begin again. It is where the threads of reality are woven and unraveled. It is the breaking point, the end of one cycle, and the start of the next." Max swallowed hard, his mind racing to process the words. His body trembled with the overwhelming gravity of the situation, of the implications of what he had just entered. It wasn't just the lodge, it wasn't just the box, it was everything. All the rules he had understood, all the boundaries that had kept the world in its place, had been shattered. "This place," Max murmured, his voice barely a whisper, "is where everything ends?" "Yes," the voice replied, "and where everything begins again." The words seemed to echo in the air, vibrating through the very space around him. Max clenched his fists, his mind struggling to make sense of it all. He had opened the box. He had unlocked this. But why? What had driven him to open it? What had driven him to this place? "You did not come here by chance, Max," the voice continued, this time with a note of finality. "You have been chosen. The box was always meant for you. It was always yours to open. And now..." The ground beneath Max's feet rumbled, and he staggered slightly, barely managing to catch himself. He turned his head, looking for the source of the disturbance. In the distance, the dark structures seemed to twitch, like they were alive, shifting. And from somewhere far below the surface, there was a deep, unearthly growl, as if something massive and ancient had just awoken. "Now you must fulfill your role." Max's eyes widened. His mind screamed with panic, but there was no escape, no way out. The reality around him was bending, warping, and in that moment, It felt as if everything in the world, every memory, every fragment of his life, was being torn away and replaced by something other. The ground beneath him began to crack, sharp lines appearing like veins spreading across his vision. The cracks pulsed with a sickly light, glowing brighter and brighter until a massive force ripped through the air. Max didn't have time to scream. The world exploded around him. The world seemed to fracture, splintering in front of Max's eyes. The ground beneath his feet shattered like glass, and he felt himself falling, plummeting downward, into a void that stretched into infinity. His body was weightless, the sensation of falling both terrifying and strangely freeing. There was no sound, no wind, just the sickening pull of gravity dragging him down into the abyss. For a moment, it felt like he would never stop falling, like the world around him would never settle. He couldn't even process the terror fully, because it was being drowned out by the sheer force of the falling itself. It was as if time had stopped, and all that existed was the endless descent. But then, just as the darkness threatened to overwhelm him, the world shifted. A massive, blinding flash of light erupted from below, shattering the blackness like an explosion. Max's body jerked violently as the light pulled at him, and for a split second, he felt his entire form stretch, his very atoms caught in the cosmic force of the energy. Then everything went still. The sensation of falling disappeared, replaced by a heavy pressure that crashed into him from all sides. His body slammed into a cold surface, his limbs buckling beneath him. He gasped for air, but there was none. His lungs burned, his chest constricted as he struggled to breathe in an air that didn't feel right. It was thick, heavy, charged with an energy that made every inhalation feel like a struggle, like his body wasn't meant to exist here. Max forced his eyes open, his vision blurred, but something was there. Shapes. Shadows. Far off in the distance, he could see flickers of movement, large, looming shapes, their forms indistinct like dark clouds shifting in the sky. He groaned, pushing himself up from the ground, but his body felt sluggish, as if it had been drained of strength. Every movement seemed sluggish, slow, unnatural, as though he were moving through syrup. The environment around him was utterly alien. The ground was no longer the smooth, black surface he had stood on moments before. Instead, it was jagged, uneven, like broken stone and twisted roots woven into a dark, unnatural landscape. The sky above him was a swirling mass of color, a deep, sickly greenish-black haze, where flickers of lightning danced erratically, illuminating the twisted, organic shapes of the landscape. The air was dense, almost liquid, pressing down on him with a weight he could hardly describe. It felt as if the very atmosphere itself was alive, watching him, pressing against his skin. Max staggered to his feet, his mind whirling with confusion. His heart pounded in his chest, but he couldn't process anything. The air was thick with a static hum, the sounds of distant groans and grinding metal reverberating through the space, creating a sense of wrongness, as if everything in this place was out of alignment, pulled from its natural order. Then he heard it, a soft sound like the rustling of leaves but sharper, more deliberate. Max turned his head quickly, his eyes scanning the environment. But there was no wind here, no rustling trees, only the broken landscape stretching out in every direction. The sound was closer now. It wasn't coming from the environment, it was coming from him. Max's breath caught in his throat as he looked down at his hands. His fingers were shaking, not from fear, but from a sensation he couldn't understand. Something was crawling beneath his skin, twisting and shifting, as if something else had invaded his body. His palms were clammy, slick with sweat, and the pulse of energy that had once radiated from the box was now deep within him, vibrating in his very bones. Then he felt it, a pressure, deep within his chest where his heart was. It wasn't his heartbeat. It was something else, something older, something that had been dormant, waiting, and now it was awakening. Max's pulse quickened as a sickening realization began to set in. Whatever he had unlocked when he opened the box, it was still inside him. It was coursing through his veins, its presence growing stronger by the second. His vision blurred again, and his breath came in quick, shallow gasps as the power in him twisted, spreading outward, taking root in his very essence. "No," Max whispered, clutching his chest. His mind raced with panic. This thing inside him, what had he done? He hadn't been prepared for this. He hadn't known. The air around him rippled, bending as though the fabric of reality was warping once again. From the edges of his vision, he saw something moving, large, dark shapes lurking in the distance. Their forms shifted and flickered in the haze, too vague to make out completely, but the weight of their presence pressed against him, like shadows hungry for his very soul. It was then that he realized he wasn't alone. Max spun around, his body tense, but the shapes in the distance seemed to recede, dissolving into the mist. Yet there was a sense of being watched, an ever-present feeling that something, was just out of sight, lingering in the darkness, waiting. His skin prickled and his heart rate accelerated. He started moving again, his steps slow, hesitant. Every direction seemed the same, the landscape utterly devoid of anything familiar. Every corner turned revealed more of the same twisted, broken earth. Yet there was something gnawing at him, a compulsion to keep moving forward as if something in the distance was pulling him. "You've crossed the threshold," the voice from before echoed again, but this time it was deeper, more distorted, as though it were coming from the very air itself. The figure's presence loomed even now, even in this distorted, alien world. "Now you must walk the path you've set into motion. There is no return from this place, Max. No escape from what you have summoned." Max's breath caught. What did that mean? What had he summoned? "You were always meant to open the box," the voice continued, its words filling the space around him, vibrating through the landscape, making the air tremble. "You were always meant to come here." Suddenly there was a shift in the landscape. The twisted trees, once distant, began to move toward him. They shifted, their roots dragging across the broken earth, like sentient creatures coming to life. Max's pulse quickened as the twisted limbs reached out toward him, their gnarled, bark-covered fingers stretching toward him with an eerie intent. He turned and ran. The ground beneath him seemed to shift and pulse with every step, the black stone rippling like the surface of water. But the trees, were closing in, their unnatural forms speeding up, their branches slithering and weaving through the air as if they were reaching for him. Max pushed harder, adrenaline spiking through his veins, but it was hopeless. The trees moved faster now, the darkness around him closing in. As he ran, the shadows deepened. They enveloped him, swallowing everything in sight, until there was nothing but the oppressive darkness. The trees were nearly upon him. And in that moment, Max understood. He wasn't just running from the trees. He was running from himself. Max's heart pounded so violently in his chest that it felt as though it might break free from his ribs. His legs ached with every step, each breath a struggle against the suffocating pressure of the air. He didn't dare look back. He couldn't afford to. He could feel the trees, the twisted limbs, the dark forms that were following, closing in on him. The ground beneath him rippled and pulsed with every step, like the world itself was alive, watching, anticipating his every move. The sharp, jagged stones cut into his boots, and the air grew thicker with each passing second, weighing him down like 1,000 unseen hands. His vision blurred, but not from exhaustion. No, this was something deeper, a distortion in the fabric of reality itself. The very air seemed to bend around him, warping in waves, pulling at his mind, dragging him into the depths of his own thoughts. The trees were closer now. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Something had changed, something had awakened. Their gnarled branches stretched toward him like fingers reaching for his very soul, their bark peeling away in thick, painful-looking strips, revealing pulsing veins of dark, glowing energy beneath. Max stumbled, his foot catching on the uneven ground. He barely managed to catch himself, his hands slapping against the rough surface of the stone, his fingers scraping across it. The sharp pain snapped him back to reality, and he pushed forward, his breath ragged, each exhale a cloud of vapor in the cold, dense air. But then there was a sound. A low rumble, deep in the ground, like the very earth was groaning in response to something ancient, something long buried. The trees stopped moving. Everything froze. The air went still, eerily quiet. Max slowed his frantic pace, his breath shallow as the silence pressed down on him, suffocating him. His senses screamed at him to run, but his feet remained rooted to the spot. Something was coming, something closer. The low rumbling grew louder, turning into a sharp, guttural hum that vibrated through the very ground beneath him. It was a pulse, a rhythm, a sound so deep it resonated within his bones. The pulse of the place where time and reality had bent, where he was no longer in control. He took a step back, but the ground under his feet shifted once more. The stone beneath him cracked, jagged lines splitting across the surface as if the very earth was coming apart. He staggered, his vision flickering, and then, in an instant, he saw it. A figure. It stood at the edge of the trees, impossibly tall and thin, shrouded in darkness. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long, jagged, like broken branches, its body obscured by a cloak of shadow. The figure didn't move, didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to make the very air around Max feel cold, suffocating. And then the voice came again, deep and resonant, like an echo from a forgotten world. It wasn't the voice of the being he had encountered earlier. No, this was something far older, far more malevolent. You should not have come here, Max. Max froze. The words were not spoken aloud, but inside his mind. They weren't even words so much as thoughts, voices from the deepest part of his being, as if the very core of his soul was being probed, twisted, and torn apart. This place is beyond you. You are not meant for what lies ahead. Max's heart raced as the figure's presence loomed larger, its form shifting with each passing second. It was not truly standing, it was growing, expanding, as though it were being born from the very void that surrounded him. It wasn't just a figure. It was an idea, a concept that had taken form, something ancient and terrifying, something unseen. You're not real, Max choked, his voice barely escaping his throat. His body trembled violently as the darkness grew thicker around him, swallowing the last vestiges of light in the distance. But the figure didn't speak. Instead, it reached out, its long, twisted arm extending toward him. The shadows in the air around it stretched, crawling like tendrils of dark smoke, and Max could feel them brushing against his skin, pulling at his very essence. He gasped, his body jerking as though it were being yanked toward the figure, an invisible force pulling him into its grasp. I am not the one who controls what happens here, the figure intoned, its voice now a low, guttural rumble. But I can guide you, Max, guide you through the broken threads. The place you've opened, it is a door. Max's head spun. A door? The box, the trees, the figure, it all seemed to make sense, yet none of it did. The reality around him was collapsing, twisting beyond recognition, and with each passing second, he felt the presence of the being pressing in harder, deeper into his mind. This is your path now. You were chosen for this. Whether you understand it or not, whether you are prepared or not. You open the door, now you must walk it. Max shook his head violently. I didn't choose this. I didn't ask for any of this. The figure's elongated form seemed to lean closer, its featureless face inches from Max's. The air around him froze. The oppressive darkness that surrounded him thickened, suffocating him, and for a moment he thought he might lose himself entirely. You have always known, Max. You were born for this. This place is where all things converge. Where the lost souls, the forgotten things, the broken fragments of reality, all come together. The figure's voice dropped to a whisper, its words curling into Max's mind like a poison. You were never meant to be free of it. You are part of it now. Max stumbled back, his body feeling heavy, slow, his mind spinning with confusion and fear. The shadows around him twisted and writhed as if they were alive, reacting to the force of the figure's words. He wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but his limbs wouldn't obey him. Every movement felt like he was moving through water, fighting against an invisible force that held him in place. And then the figure reached again. Its arm, impossibly long, stretched out, and its fingers, black as the void, closed around his throat. Max gasped, his lungs unable to fill with air as the darkness constricted around him. His vision flickered, the world blurring, and for a moment, he thought he might lose himself entirely to the suffocating grip of the figure. But just as he thought he would pass out, he felt a sudden, intense pull, a force from within him. The box inside his chest. The power that had awakened when he opened it. And as that power surged through him, he realized one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about embracing what he had become. Max's breath was strangled, his body burning with the oppressive weight of the figure's grip. Every muscle in his neck and chest screamed for release, but there was nothing he could do. The darkness around him grew thicker, more suffocating, like a living thing wrapping around him, suffusing the air with a cold, suffocating pressure. But then a spark. At first, it was barely a flicker, an ember in the depths of his mind, an ancient sense of something, power, that had been buried within him, waiting. The box. The pulse. The energy that had once seemed like a curse, like a burden, was now more than just a presence. It was him. The power surged through Max like a storm breaking free from its chains. His heart raced as a strange warmth spread through him, lighting up his veins like fire. The grip around his throat loosened just enough to let him gasp in a breath of air. The force from within him, the very energy he had unwittingly unlocked when he opened the box, roared to life, flooding his body with a sensation that was both alien and deeply familiar. For the first time, Max felt it. He was part of this place. He had always been meant to walk the path. He had been chosen long ago. The figure's presence, its ancient power, had been waiting for him, just as the box had been waiting to be opened. Max had stumbled blindly into this void, but now he could feel the threads of it all. He was part of it all. The figure, sensing the change, let out a low, guttural growl, its fingers tightening once more around Max's throat. But this time Max didn't fight. Instead, he let the darkness in. He embraced it. With a deep, shuddering breath, Max closed his eyes. He let the power swell within him, let it burn through his body, until his very bones felt like they might shatter under the strain. But the sensation didn't tear him apart. It expanded him, stretched him, until he felt as though he were everywhere. He opened his eyes, and the world around him shifted. The figure recoiled, its long limbs jerking back as the pulse of energy from Max exploded outward in a sudden shockwave. The shadows in the air fractured, splitting apart like glass. Max's body radiated with a dark light, ripples of energy warping the space around him as the figure struggled to regain control. "What are you doing?" the figure's voice hissed, panic now creeping into the depths of its tone. "You cannot control this place. You cannot control me." Max's lips curled into a grim smile, his chest heaving with the intensity of the power coursing through him. It wasn't just his body that had changed. The very landscape around him was bending to his will, like clay in the hands of a master sculptor. The jagged ground beneath his feet groaned and shifted, ripples running through the broken stone as if it too were alive. The trees that had once been the stalking shadows seemed to recoil now, their gnarled branches twitching and shuddering in the wake of his newfound power. "I don't have to control it," Max said through gritted teeth, his voice barely recognizable. It was deeper, darker, like a reflection of the energy now pulsing within him. "I am it." The figure snarled, its form elongating even further, stretching impossibly thin, like it was trying to reach beyond its limits. Its voice, once so certain, now faltered. You are not like the others. You cannot handle it. This place will consume you, will tear you apart from the inside. You cannot." But Max didn't hear the figure's words anymore. The energy inside him had overwhelmed all thought, all sense of self. There was only the sensation of power, of control. The pulse of dark energy inside him flared again, and with it, the figure's form seemed to dissolve, warping into the surrounding shadows. The trees that had once crept forward now bent away, recoiling in terror from the storm he was creating. The very air seemed to thicken, the humidity rising as the temperature dropped sharply. The ground cracked beneath him, and the black stone that had once felt so solid began to shift again, as though the world itself was being undone. Max was no longer sure of what he was doing. Was he fighting? Was he becoming one with this place? All he knew was that the power had taken him, consumed him. And now it was his, it was inside him, around him, and it was unraveling everything in its path. In the distance, a low rumble sounded once more, but this time it was different. It wasn't the growl of the figure, it was a call, a summoning. A voice that reverberated from the very earth itself, a voice that seemed to vibrate with age-old power, deep and resonant, calling him. "Max." The voice rang through the void, but this time, it wasn't coming from the figure. It was coming from the depths of the landscape, from the very fabric of this place. It was like the land itself was alive, speaking to him, drawing him in. Max stumbled forward, the energy still swirling within him. His vision blurred again, but this time, it wasn't just the distortion of reality, it was the sensation of becoming the landscape, of feeling the very core of this place. His body was trembling, but not from fear anymore, from something much deeper. He was connected to it now. He could feel the land pulsing with energy, the sky shivering with the resonance of power that was so old, so ancient, it seemed to stretch across time itself. And then, as if in answer to the call, the ground beneath him cracked open, a deep fissure running through the black stone, as if the earth were giving way to something far darker, far more ancient. From the darkness below, a shape began to emerge, a twisting, writhing mass of shadows and light, taking form in the same way the figure had, but this one was different. It was something more primal, something that could not be named. It was the very essence of the void. Max couldn't help but stare, his pulse quickening as the shadows swirled, forming into something large, something immense. His body tensed, ready for whatever came next, but there was no fear anymore, only understanding. He was no longer just part of the world he knew. He was part of something much bigger. And as the shape fully materialized in front of him, its gaze, its presence, pierced through him, Max knew one thing for sure. The path ahead was no longer just his. It was the path of the land, of the shadows, of everything that had been bound by the box, bound by the dark power that now filled him. This was where the world broke, and where it remade itself. Max's pulse raced in his ears, each beat echoing the overwhelming hum of the darkness surrounding him. The immense shape that had risen from the ground, the thing that had been summoned, loomed before him like an impossible nightmare given form. Its very presence warped the air, bending reality around it like a heat wave distorting the view of a distant horizon. The shadow it cast seemed to consume the very light in the void, pulling everything into a deep, oppressive blackness. The ground beneath Max's feet continued to tremble, the cracks in the stone widening, like the earth itself was tearing apart at the seams. It was as if every fragment of reality, every shred of the world he once knew, was being unknotted and unraveled, one thread at a time. And yet, despite the chaos, despite the sense that the world was falling apart, Max stood at the center of it all, calm, anchored, connected. The figure before him, this new being that had emerged from the very core of the land, was not like the dark figure he had encountered earlier. No, this one was far more primal. Its form shifted constantly, like smoke that could never settle, an endless flow of darkness and light that moved in unpredictable patterns. The shadow seemed to writhe as though it were alive, as if the very shape of it was made up of thousands of smaller pieces, all moving, all responding to some unseen force. Max could feel it. The land was alive, and so was this entity. It was the manifestation of this place, the void, the space between worlds. It was the soul of the land, and Max had unknowingly become a part of it. "You are not the same as the others," the entity's voice resonated in his mind. It was deep, guttural, like the very earth was speaking through it. The sound vibrated in his chest, reverberating through every fiber of his being. The voice was both alien and familiar, like the whisper of a forgotten memory. Max's chest tightened. His mind struggled to comprehend the enormity of what was happening. His body was no longer just his own, it was part of something much older, something far more powerful. The pulse of energy, the dark force that had surged within him, was now intertwined with this entity, with the land itself. Max felt it deep in his bones, the pull of the place, the binding force of its energy. He wasn't simply an observer anymore, he was becoming it. "What am I now?" Max asked, his voice hoarse, barely more than a whisper. His mind swirled with questions, with fears, but there was something else, something deeper, that seemed to speak to him now. It was as if the land itself was reaching into him, pulling him toward a truth that was beyond human comprehension. The shadow before him shifted again, its shape twisting, coiling like a serpent, before it spoke once more. "You are the path, Max. The bridge. The one who opens the door, who walks between worlds." Max shuddered at the words. "The bridge?" "Yes," the entity continued, its voice thick with ancient power. "You open the door with the box. But now you must choose. You can either accept your place here, among the void and the land, or you can fight it. Fight yourself. But know this, the choice will not be easy. The breaking of reality is a delicate thing. It is not just the world that has been undone, it is your soul as well." Max took a step back, his legs unsteady. The enormity of what he was hearing, what he was feeling, was too much. The idea of his very soul being undone felt like a weight on his chest, like a chainsaw to the heart. He had opened the box, yes. He had come here, but this place, this land, was not what he had imagined. The power that had been unleashed had changed everything, and now Max had to decide whether to embrace it or resist it. But the question nagged at him. Could he even fight it? Could he fight the land, the darkness, the pull that had already begun to seep into him? The shadow before him seemed to sense his hesitation, its form shifting again, this time more violently. The earth trembled beneath him, and for a split second, Max thought he might be swallowed by the fissures in the stone. But the rift didn't come. Instead, the darkness thickened, wrapping around him like chains, pressing in from all sides. It was a suffocating feeling, like being buried alive, but still, the power coursing through him kept him standing, kept him aware. "You were always meant to be here," the entity whispered, its voice now a soft hiss, more like the rustle of dry leaves in a forgotten forest. "You've always been part of the land, part of the void. You just didn't know it until now." Max clenched his fists, fighting the rising panic in his chest. His body trembled, but not from fear. No, this was different. The power within him, this darkness, was starting to feel natural, starting to feel like it had always been a part of him. The land, the box, the figure, everything that had led him to this moment, they were all part of the same tapestry, the same binding force that held everything together. "I don't belong here," Max said through gritted teeth, his voice shaking. I'm not like this." The entity's laughter echoed around him, low and mocking. "You are exactly like this, Max. You always have been. The box didn't change you, it revealed you." Max shook his head violently. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't believe it. He had been just an ordinary man, hadn't he? He had opened the box out of curiosity, out of fear, out of some ancient, subconscious need. But this? This was too much. He could feel the power, his power, coursing through him, urging him to embrace it, to step into the unknown. The rift in reality around him seemed to beckon him forward, to take his place in this world of shadows, of broken dimensions. But then a sudden thought struck him, as sharp and clear as a knife to the gut. What if the only way to save himself, to save anything, was to reject this force, to fight it with everything he had left? With that realization, Max gritted his teeth and pushed forward, stepping away from the darkness, from the pull of the land. The energy inside him flared, surging wildly, threatening to overwhelm him, but Max fought back, holding on to the last vestiges of his humanity. "I will not be part of this," Max shouted, his voice filled with newfound strength, defiance ringing in his tone. "I refuse to be a part of the void." The shadow before him writhed in fury, its form flashing with an intensity that made the air crackle with power. The rift in the ground widened, the land itself groaning in agony. "You cannot escape it," the entity hissed, its voice now a terrifying growl. "Asterisk, it is already inside you. You are already mine." Max took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of willpower he had left. The energy within him swirled violently, but he refused to let it consume him. His body screamed in protest as he fought to regain control, but he knew what he had to do. With one final determined step, Max extended his hand outward, pushing against the darkness with every fiber of his being. And in that moment something broke. Max's hand reached out into the darkness, trembling, his body fighting against the torrent of energy that wanted to rip him apart. The air around him thickened, swirling with chaotic pulses of energy, the very fabric of reality bending and twisting under the weight of his defiance. The land, this strange, broken realm, felt alive, its every breath felt like a pressure against his chest. The rift between worlds, between his past and the abyss that now surrounded him, seemed to stretch open, pulling at him, tugging at his soul. Yet Max didn't falter. His mind was clear now, sharper than it had ever been. The power that had surged through him, that had tempted him with the promise of control and destruction, was no longer something he was afraid of. He had come to understand it. He had come to understand the true nature of this place. It wasn't just a world of darkness and shadows, it was a reflection of choice, of the consequences of every decision, every moment of human weakness and strength. And now he was making his choice. With his hand outstretched, Max could feel the energy building, the power surging within him, threatening to consume him. But he didn't let it. Instead, he embraced it, harnessed it, letting the dark currents flow through him without surrendering to them. He was still himself. He was still Max. "You can't fight this," the voice of the entity growled, its form undulating and twisting before him like smoke trapped in a hurricane. The air vibrated with its power, ripples of pure energy streaking across the ground, splitting the stone beneath him. The voice, no longer calm, was filled with something that could almost be called rage. "You can't resist me. You can't stop what has already been set into motion. The door has been opened." Max's fingers flexed, feeling the power within him grow. His chest tightened with the force of it, but he didn't back down. He planted his feet firmly on the broken ground, summoning the willpower from somewhere deep within. "I can't stop what's been set in motion," he said, his voice rising with every word. "Maybe not, but I can still choose how it ends. I can still choose where I go. You're not my fate. I am." The ground cracked open again, this time with a sound like the breaking of bones, the rift widening further as the land itself seemed to recoil. The entity's twisted form writhed violently, as though it were struggling to hold its shape, to contain itself. "You think you can escape it, Max?" the voice hissed, now filled with a cold, mocking bitterness. "You are already part of this. You always have been. This place, this void, is you." The force of its words struck him like a physical blow, but Max gritted his teeth and pushed forward. He could feel the pull of the land, the shadowy force trying to drag him back into its cold embrace. It felt like drowning, like the very air was trying to fill his lungs with something poisonous. But he refused to let it consume him. Instead, he reached deeper, not just into the power that filled him, but into something else. The core of his self, something he had buried long ago, something that had always been there. The very thing that made him human. His will, his stubborn refusal to let go, to accept what others wanted him to be. The energy inside him flared again, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The cracks in the stone beneath him grew wider, the ground splitting apart in jagged, violent fractures, like the world was being torn at the seams. The shadowy figure before him twisted, its shape unstable, as if it were being undone by the force of his defiance. Max's hand continued to reach out, his body humming with the overwhelming force of the power. He felt the weight of it, felt it pressing down on him, trying to force him into submission. But he didn't let go. He didn't retreat. He took the energy, absorbed it, and with a strength he hadn't known he possessed, turned it back. In an instant, a wave of energy burst forth from him, blasting out in all directions, sweeping across the land with a sound like the tearing of the fabric of the universe. The force of it was so intense, so raw, that the ground beneath him splintered into jagged shards, sending stone fragments hurtling into the air. The air crackled with power, and Max felt the rush of it, a surge of release like he had finally broken free from the chains that had bound him. But as the energy rippled outward, something shifted. The figure, the entity, screamed in fury, its form distorting violently, as though it was being torn apart from the inside. The ground beneath Max's feet began to shake more violently, the stones splitting wider, the rift in reality yawning open like a hungry mouth. Max gasped as he was hit with a sudden pull, a violent tug at his soul, a force trying to drag him into the abyss. It was as if the very void of this place was consuming him, pulling at his very essence, threatening to erase him completely. But then another thought, another realization flashed in his mind. He wasn't just a part of this place. He was connected to it, yes, but that connection wasn't a chain. It was a choice. He had the power to walk away from it. He had the power to break free. He could leave. Max closed his eyes, steadying his breath, and focused. The power inside him, the dark energy that had surged through him, had grown wild. But now he could feel the shift. The pull from the rift, from the shadows. It was not him anymore. He could see it clearly, as if the fog of confusion had lifted from his mind. The entity had tried to make him believe he was part of this place, that he was lost to it. But he wasn't. He was stronger than that. He had the strength to unmake this. With a forceful breath, Max reached deep inside, pushing against the wave of darkness that threatened to overwhelm him. His heart pounded, but his mind was clear. In a final, overwhelming burst, Max broke the connection. A violent shockwave erupted from his body, sending the dark energy recoiling like a sudden tidal wave crashing into the shore. The ground cracked and splintered further, but this time, instead of the void swallowing him whole, the energy recoiled, fading back into the distance. The rift that had once felt infinite began to close, like a door being slammed shut. The land trembled beneath him, its pulse faltering. The entity's screams grew distant, its form dissipating into the air like smoke, losing its shape as the land began to collapse in on itself. Max stood, panting, his heart still racing, but he felt the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. The land around him was no longer shifting, no longer pulling him apart. The darkness that had enveloped him began to recede, unraveling as the very fabric of reality reknit itself. Max had broken the cycle. He had broken free. Max stood in the aftermath of the storm, his body trembling from the sheer intensity of what had just occurred. His chest rose and fell with each jagged breath, his heart still thumping erratically in his ribcage. The energy that had once surged through him like a flood now felt distant, like a powerful wave receding back into the ocean from which it came. The air, heavy with static and pressure, had finally begun to clear. But even as the immediate chaos faded, the weight of what he had just done pressed heavily on his mind. The land around him was eerily still. The cracks in the earth, which had once seemed alive, were now frozen in time, their jagged edges etched into the stone like the remnants of a forgotten battle. The sky above, once a dark swirling mass of black and green, had returned to a dull, muted gray, as if the world itself was recovering from an immense strain. But Max didn't feel relief. No, he felt something else. A deep, gnawing emptiness, as if the very act of breaking free had torn something inside him, something he couldn't quite name. He was standing on the edge of a precipice, the last remnants of the abyss receding behind him. The ground beneath his feet was solid once again, but there was an unsettling stillness in the air. The kind of silence that makes you question whether the world has truly ended, or if you're simply too afraid to listen. Max swallowed hard, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand, his skin clammy with sweat. He could still feel the presence of the darkness lingering at the edges of his mind, like a distant echo, soft but persistent. He had won, but at what cost? His fingers curled into fists at his sides as he turned to look at the landscape, his eyes scanning the once broken world. It was still there, the same twisted, jagged terrain that had defined this place. But now there was a hollow sense to it, an emptiness where the power had once surged. The trees, the shadows, the very essence of the land, it was all quieter now, stripped of its malice, yet somehow even more unnerving because of it. I should have been prepared, Max muttered to himself. his voice barely a whisper as he stared out across the fractured world. I should have known. But the truth was there had been no way to know. The box had been an enigma, a mystery, something he had never fully understood. He had opened it out of curiosity, out of a need to know, to feel something deeper than the monotony of his old life. But now he realized that knowing had been the worst thing he could have done. This land, this dark realm, had taken something from him. It had shown him parts of himself that he hadn't known existed, parts he wasn't sure he wanted to face. The shadows seemed to shift at the edges of his vision, flickering like ghosts. He shook his head, trying to shake off the unease that clung to him like a heavy cloak. The danger, the darkness, it was all still there just beneath the surface. He could still feel the faint hum of the land's pulse, the remnant of the power that had once threatened to consume him. He was still connected to it. Max walked forward slowly, his footsteps barely making a sound on the smooth stone beneath him. With every step, he felt the weight of the journey pressing down on him, the consequences of his actions weighing heavier with each moment. What had he really achieved by breaking the cycle? Had he simply delayed the inevitable? Or had he done something worse? Had he sealed himself into a fate where he would forever be haunted by the remnants of this place? The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant sound of the wind stirring the broken trees. But even that felt wrong, as though the breeze itself was mourning, as if the world around him was grieving for something lost. Max stopped in his tracks as a faint noise broke the stillness, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, drifting on the wind. He froze, every muscle in his body tensing. The voice was faint but unmistakable. It was the same voice he had heard when he first opened the box, the one that had been guiding him, taunting him, pulling him deeper into this nightmare. Max. His breath caught in his throat. The voice was softer now, but no less present. It felt as though it was coming from inside his mind, a whispering thought that had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface. You cannot run from what you have awakened. Max clenched his fists, the power within him still flickering, faint but potent. The remnants of the energy were still alive inside him, coiling like a serpent in his veins. He could feel the pulse of it, a faint echo of what had been before, but he couldn't deny it anymore. This place had changed him. He had been marked by it. I didn't want this, Max growled, the words escaping him before he could stop them. I never asked for any of this. I just wanted to understand. The voice laughed, a low, mocking sound that echoed through the broken world around him. Understanding? Is that what you think this was about, Max? This was never about understanding. This was about choice. About what you were willing to sacrifice to know the truth. Max staggered back, his vision blurring for a moment as the weight of the voice pressed down on him like an invisible hand. His mind was spinning, the walls of his reality cracking. He had always wanted answers, always felt the need to peel back the layers of the unknown, to dig into the mysteries that had haunted him. But now, in this moment, he realized just how much those answers had cost him. You cannot undo what has been done, the voice continued, growing colder. You are part of this world now, Max. You always have been. The moment you opened the box, you became a part of the cycle, a thread woven into the fabric of this place. Max's knees buckled beneath him, and he dropped to the ground, his hands shaking as he pressed them into the stone. His head throbbed, the pressure inside his skull almost unbearable. The shadows around him seemed to shift, coiling tighter, like the land was closing in around him. He was trapped. What do you want from me? Max whispered, his voice barely audible. What am I supposed to do now? The voice seemed to pause for a moment, as though considering his words. And then it spoke again, quieter this time, almost sympathetic. You have already chosen, Max. The question is no longer what you want. The question is, what will you do with the power you now hold? Max's heart sank into his stomach. The power. The power he had fought so hard to reject, to control. The power that had been his undoing, and now it seemed to be the very thing that defined him. And as the voice faded into the silence, leaving Max with only his thoughts and the fractured remnants of a world that seemed to be slipping further and further from his grasp, one thing became painfully clear. He was no longer just a man. He was the bridge. The silence that followed the voice's final words was suffocating. Max's heart thudded in his chest, each beat echoing in the stillness like a countdown, like something was waiting, watching. He could feel the pulse of the land beneath his feet, the subtle hum of energy beneath the stone, still resonating in his bones. It was as if the ground itself was breathing, as if the very air was alive, waiting for him to make his next move. Max gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand. He wanted to scream, to throw his fists into the air and demand answers, but he couldn't. There was no one here to hear him, no one to listen to his pleas. The land had absorbed him, had taken everything from him, and now he was it. The weight of the entity's words pressed on him. He was the bridge, the thread between worlds, the one who had opened the door. And that meant he was no longer just a part of the world he had known. He was something else, something darker, something more. He staggered forward, trying to move, but his limbs felt heavy, as if he was dragging the weight of the entire world behind him. The land shifted beneath his feet, groaning in protest, the ground splitting and cracking as if it could feel his every movement, his every thought. With each step, the air around him seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. The shadows, once an omnipresent force, now felt closer, like they were following him, observing him, waiting for him to take the next step in this twisted game he had found himself in. The figure, the entity, it was still there, somewhere in the depths of his mind, whispering its dark promises. Max stumbled through the broken landscape, his eyes scanning the jagged stones and the twisted trees that surrounded him. The forest, once ominous and suffocating, was now empty, its towering figures silent and unmoving. It was like a place caught between worlds, a world that had been abandoned and forgotten by time itself. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly empty. The land was watching him. The trees, though still and lifeless, were not gone. The shadows in the distance were not gone. They were waiting. Why am I here? Max whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. What am I supposed to do with all this? The wind whispered through the branches above him, a soft rustling like a gentle reminder of the world that once was, before everything had broken apart. It was a sound that might have been comforting, but instead, it made Max feel even more alone. The trees were dead, the wind was hollow, and the world around him felt wrong. He wasn't just in a place anymore. He was in between, caught in the space between where he had been and where he was going. There was no going back. There was only forward. Max stopped at the edge of a ravine, staring into the abyss that seemed to stretch endlessly in front of him. The ground beneath his feet was cracked, the air thick with the heavy weight of something ancient, something that had been buried deep for far too long. The ravine seemed to stretch out like a gaping mouth, its jagged edges cutting into the earth like teeth waiting to bite. He could feel the pull. It was subtle at first, a low hum, a whisper at the back of his mind. The voice, the power, was calling him forward. The shadows were reaching out to him, pulling him toward the edge, toward the void below. You cannot escape, Max. The voice came again, soft and insistent, but now there was no malice in it, only the cold, undeniable truth. It was him. Max's fists clenched. The power, the bridge, it was him. His heart thudded in his chest, his mind racing as the pieces began to fall into place. This wasn't just about a place or a curse. It was about what he was. The land had chosen him. It had pulled him in, broken him, and remade him. And now it demanded that he accept it. There was no escaping this, no denying it, no running from what he had become. He wasn't just a man trapped in a broken world. He was part of this world. He was a part of the void, of the shadows, of everything that had been shattered by the box. Max stepped forward, his boots crunching softly on the fractured ground. The abyss before him seemed to widen, the darkness spreading like ink in water, its depths impossible to fathom. The wind picked up again, swirling around him, and for a moment he thought he could hear voices, distant, far-off voices, echoing from the darkness below. Do you hear them? The voice whispered again, the shadows thickening around him, as if the very air was bending toward him, pulling him into the void. The lost ones, the forgotten. They call to you, Max. You are the bridge between worlds, between the living and the lost. They are waiting for you. You can hear them, can't you? Max closed his eyes, fighting the pull, the urge to listen, to reach out. The voices were soft at first, like whispers in the wind, but as he focused, the sound grew louder, clearer. They were voices, human voices, desperate, pleading, lost. And then, beneath those voices, another sound emerged, a low, guttural growl, deep and feral, like something far older, far more ancient. It wasn't a voice. It was a presence. Something that had always been there, waiting, watching. And it was coming closer. Max's breath caught in his throat as the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The void wasn't just an empty space. It was a cage. A prison for the lost souls, the ones who had failed to escape. The ones who had been swallowed by the darkness. And now Max was one of them. He staggered back, his hands trembling as the weight of the revelation crushed down on him. He wasn't just a bridge between worlds, he was a part of them. The lost ones were part of him, and he was part of them. His soul was entwined with theirs, and the darkness was his birthright. The abyss below wasn't just a place, it was his destiny. Max shook his head, trying to block out the voices, trying to block out the growl that was growing louder, closer, until it was vibrating through his very bones. And then, in the distance, a shape emerged from the shadows. A dark figure, tall and impossibly thin, stepping forward with an unnatural fluidity, its eyes glowing with an unearthly light. Max's heart stopped. This wasn't just any shadow. This was the figure from before, the one that had haunted him, the one that had watched him. And now it was here, in front of him. "You have been chosen, Max." The figure's voice was deep, ancient, and unmistakably familiar. "The void has taken you. You cannot escape what you have become. You have opened the door, and now it is time for you to walk it." Max stared at the figure, his vision blurring as the world around him seemed to distort. The abyss stretched before him, and the weight of his fate pressed down on him, pulling him forward into the depths. "Embrace it," the figure whispered, its voice like a breath in the darkness. "This is who you are. This is who you've always been." Max closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, his hands curling into fists. The darkness was closing in, the voices were growing louder, but now he felt something inside him, a flicker of light in the deepest part of his soul. It was time to face what he had become. Max felt the ground shift beneath him, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor that seemed to radiate from the very heart of the abyss. The shadows thickened around him, swirling like a storm of ink in the air. Every breath he took felt heavier, as if the air itself was saturated with the weight of what was coming. The darkness in front of him pulsed, a living thing, alive with an unnatural energy that whispered and beckoned, wrapping itself around him like a cloak. The figure that stood before him was impossibly tall, its limbs elongated and twisted, but still, strangely human. Its eyes glowed with an ethereal light, flickering like flames caught in the wind. Max's heart skipped a beat as he met its gaze, feeling an overwhelming pressure in his chest, as though the very presence of this creature was pressing down on him. "You cannot run from who you are," the figure's voice intoned, its deep, hollow tone resonating in Max's bones. "The path has been set. You are the bridge. The doorway between the worlds, between the living and the lost. You have already crossed over, Max. You can feel it, can't you?" Max's pulse quickened, his body trembling. He could feel it, the pull. The very essence of the land, the shadows, the abyss, it was inside him, crawling beneath his skin, tugging at his soul, demanding that he accept his fate. The voice of the entity, the whisper of the land, was louder now, louder than ever. It was him, it was part of him, and it had always been there, waiting for this moment. Max clenched his fists at his sides, gritting his teeth as he fought to keep himself grounded. The landscape around him was shifting, bending, like a nightmare unraveling at the seams. The stone beneath his feet cracked, splintered, and reformed into jagged shapes, while the trees, the shadows, seemed to stretch and curl, their branches twitching like hands reaching for him. "You have always been part of this place," the figure continued, its voice softer now, almost comforting in its coldness. "This world is where you were meant to be. The land has claimed you. The darkness has claimed you." Max's head was spinning, his vision blurring as his mind struggled to grasp the full weight of what was happening. He could feel it, the energy that had flowed through him earlier, the dark power that had tried to consume him, was alive within him now. It was no longer just an external force. It was him. It was a part of him, and the land, the void, the shadows, they were all part of him. The figure stepped forward, its movements fluid like it was gliding on the air itself. It was so close now that Max could feel the chill of its presence, like ice crawling under his skin. He wanted to pull away, to run, but he couldn't. His feet were rooted to the ground, as if the very earth beneath him had a hold on him. "You feel it, don't you?" the figure asked, its voice slipping into his mind, like a whisper threading through his thoughts. "The weight of the void. The call of the lost souls. The ones who were never able to escape. They're you, Max. They're inside you. The abyss is no longer a place you can visit. It is where you are from." Max's breath caught in his throat. The voice, the shadows, the land, they were all pulling him in, pushing him toward the void. The abyss. The place where lost souls wandered, trapped in the endless cycle of darkness. And now it was his fate. He had opened the box. He had crossed the threshold. And the darkness had claimed him. "You can't fight it," the figure continued, its voice thick with an ancient certainty. "You were never meant to. You are the bridge. The one who connects the living and the lost. The one who brings the darkness into the light and the light into the darkness. You are the doorway, Max. You are the way." Max's vision swam. He wanted to scream, to push back, but his body wouldn't obey. His muscles were locked in place, as if the very fabric of his being was being rewritten, altered, changed by the force of the land. He could feel the pull, no, the demand, of the abyss growing stronger, stronger with every passing second. It was as though the very air itself was pressing in on him, suffocating him, bending him to its will. The shadows reached for him, curling around his feet like fingers, pulling at his ankles, tugging at him, urging him toward the precipice. He could see the edge of the ravine now, the darkness stretching below him, a gaping maw that seemed to beckon him closer. And the voices, oh, the voices, were louder now, not just whispers but screams, wails of the lost souls that had been consumed by the void. Max clenched his jaw, fighting the pull, fighting the suffocating pressure that threatened to swallow him whole. He could feel the presence of the land inside him, its pulse beating in time with his own, the shadows wrapping around his mind, his soul. And then he realized something. The darkness was not just outside him, it was within him. The abyss was not just a place, it was a part of him. A part of the world he had unlocked. A part of the cycle he had opened. He had not just stepped into this world. He had become a part of it. Max's fingers twitched as the last remnants of his resistance crumbled away. The land had chosen him. The darkness had chosen him. He was no longer just a man lost and afraid. He was something else. He was the bridge, the doorway between the living and the lost. And now there was no turning back. The figure before him smiled, its lips curling into a twisted expression of satisfaction, as if it had been waiting for this moment for centuries. It is time, Max, time to fulfill your purpose. Max's heart thundered in his chest. He could hear the call of the abyss now, louder than ever, the voices of the lost souls rising from the depths, their cries filling his ears. He could feel them, the souls of the forgotten, the trapped, the ones who had never made it out. They were reaching for him. They were waiting for him to bring them back, to open the door for them, to let them through. And with that realization, Max stepped forward into the void. Max's heart pounded violently against his ribs as he stepped forward, the ground beneath his feet no longer solid, no longer reassuring. The moment his foot touched the precipice, it was as though the very earth had disappeared beneath him, and the abyss below opened its jaws wider, beckoning him into its endless, unrelenting darkness. The figure, the ancient, towering presence, watched him closely, its glowing eyes unwavering as Max took another step forward. The shadows wrapped around him like thick tendrils, curling up his legs, his arms, until they felt like they were part of him, like they had always been there, like he had always been a part of this place. There was no longer a clear division between the land and himself. The void was within him now as much as he was within it. The voice, his voice, the land's voice, echoed in his mind, a low, rumbling hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. This is your path, Max. The one you opened. The one you walked. You are the bridge. The connection. The doorway. You were never meant to escape, and you will never truly be free from it. Max's breath hitched, his mind swimming in the sheer enormity of the truth that was unfolding around him. The abyss wasn't just something to be feared, it was something to be embraced. He had opened the door, yes, but now he was the keeper. Now he was the one who would decide who or what crossed into the darkness, and who stayed behind. But that was the terrifying part. What would he decide? And who would he let through? The darkness seemed to respond to his thoughts as if it were alive, listening, watching. The wind picked up again, the trees that surrounded him shaking violently, their limbs creaking and groaning as if they too were alive, alive with the same hunger that gnawed at Max's soul. Max couldn't see the sky anymore. The void had swallowed it, and all that was left was the thick, oppressive blackness. But despite the darkness, he could feel it, the pull of the lost souls, the ones who had been trapped in this place long before he ever arrived. He could feel their weight, their desperation, their endless yearning to escape the void that had claimed them. He could feel them inside him, their whispers and wails curling into his mind, wrapping themselves around his thoughts like poisonous vines. "Help us," they whispered, their voices soft, mournful, a chorus of the damned. "Free us." Max staggered, his hand gripping the edge of the ravine, his mind whirling with the weight of their pleas. He wanted to scream at them, to tell them that he couldn't do it, that he wasn't strong enough, that he wasn't capable of deciding who lived and who died, who escaped and who stayed. He wasn't the one who should be making those choices. But it was too late. They had already made their choice when they had chosen him. The land had chosen him. The box had chosen him. The darkness had chosen him. The weight of their collective sorrow pressed down on him, so heavy that it felt as if the air itself was suffocating him. He was drowning in the voices, drowning in their endless cries. The land, the void, the abyss, they were all alive and they were waiting for him to act. His fingers twitched. A single step backward would take him away from the edge. It would take him away from the power, away from the responsibility. But he couldn't move. He couldn't turn back. Instead, he stepped forward again. The shadows seemed to react immediately. They roiled, twisting and shifting in the air, like dark waves crashing against a shore. The figure before him spoke again, its voice like an ancient river flowing through the corridors of time. Do you feel it now, Max? Do you understand? You are part of this land. You are part of the void. The lost souls, they are part of you. This is your purpose. This is what you have become. Max's breath came in short, shallow gasps. His mind felt like it was being torn apart, ripped in half by the gravity of the entity's words. He could feel the weight of the lost souls pressing against him, trying to pull him down into their despair, into their endless suffering. But there was another presence too. It was darker. It was deeper. It was something more primal. Max's eyes snapped open wide as a new, horrifying realization bloomed in his mind. The abyss was not just the realm of the lost souls. No, it was the home of something older, something ancient, something that had waited far longer than the souls that had been swallowed by it. The growl he had heard earlier, the one that had crawled beneath his skin, it was not the sound of the lost souls. It was something else, something far more dangerous. You are not ready for this, the voice rumbled, sending a chill through Max's entire being. It was low, guttural, like a growl from the deepest reaches of the earth itself. It wasn't the figure's voice. It was something far more terrifying, something alive in the abyss, watching, waiting. The true force of the darkness. Max's legs felt weak. He felt the ground beneath him shift again, the shadows deepening, curling around his body, as though the very earth itself was swallowing him. The wind howled, pushing against him with unnatural force. The ground cracked beneath his feet, and the very air seemed to shudder, as though a terrible weight was pressing down on him, suffocating him. But still, the pull of the abyss was undeniable. It was him now. It was the land. It was the void. And Max had become both a part of it and its keeper. The abyss before him seemed to reach out, a deep, yawning mouth that threatened to swallow him whole. His vision blurred, his mind spinning, and he realized with a sickening jolt that the voices of the lost souls were no longer whispering. They were screaming, howling in desperation and fury. They wanted out. And then, as if in response to their screams, the darkness parted slightly, revealing something beyond, something ancient, terrifying, and immense. It was a shape, a figure, but not like anything Max had seen before. It was massive, so vast that it seemed to fill the entire sky, filling every inch of his vision. Its form was obscured by the shadows, but Max could feel it. A malevolent presence, something that was older than time itself. And it was coming closer. Max couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He couldn't even breathe. And then the figure stepped forward, out of the shadows. Your time has come, Max. The air grew thicker, the pressure around Max intensifying until it felt like a physical weight pressing against him. He could feel the pulse of the abyss beneath his feet, the unseen force pulling him deeper into the darkness. It was as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel, fraying at the edges, and Max was caught in the center, helpless, powerless to resist. The massive figure before him stirred, its presence filling every inch of his vision. The shadows around it shifted and writhed as though the very darkness was alive, breathing. Max's heart hammered in his chest, and every instinct in his body screamed for him to run, to turn and flee from this impossible, terrifying being. But there was nowhere to run. The abyss surrounded him. He had no escape. The figure's eyes glowed, an eerie, unsettling light that seemed to cut through the oppressive dark, settling on Max like a weight on his soul. Its form was still shifting, indistinct, but there was something vast about it, something ancient. He could feel it in his bones. It was as though he were staring at the embodiment of the void itself. Your time has come, Max. The voice rumbled again, deeper this time, a sound like an ancient earthquake shaking the very foundation of the world. The words resonated in his chest, vibrating through his rib cage, as though the entity's presence was making the very air itself tremble. You thought you understood, but you don't. You never did. Max's breath came in shallow gasps, his mind spinning as he tried to process what was happening. The abyss was no longer just a place. It was alive. It was aware. And he had awakened it. No, Max whispered, shaking his head as the realization hit him like a crashing wave. No, I didn't open it. I didn't mean to. The figure's laugh was deep, low, and unrelenting. It echoed through the very fabric of reality, the sound vibrating inside Max's skull, rattling his teeth. "You don't mean to do anything, Max. This is not about intention. It is about what you are. What you've always been." Max tried to step back, but the ground beneath him seemed to shift again, the shadows deepening and curling around his legs like thick, cold chains. The air grew heavier and the pressure in his chest became unbearable. The entity's form seemed to pulse with every beat of his heart, as though it were feeding off his fear, feeding off his helplessness. "You?" Max's voice faltered. "What do you want from me? Why me?" The figure stepped forward, its shape now becoming clearer, though still incomprehensible. The darkness swirled around it like a storm, but within that storm, Max could make out shifting shapes, broken faces, twisted forms, writhing bodies. They were the lost souls, the ones who had been swallowed by the abyss long before he arrived. They were still here, trapped in this dark void, unable to escape. "You, Max," the entity's voice rumbled, "are the key. You open the door and you are now the keeper. You are the one who decides who walks through it and who remains behind." Max's mind raced, his thoughts a blur of panic and confusion. Keeper? What did that even mean? He had never asked for this. He had never wanted to be a part of this world, to be caught between life and death, between the living and the lost. All he had wanted was answers. He had wanted to know why. He had wanted to understand. But understanding had cost him everything. "You," Max gasped, his body trembling under the weight of the entity's gaze. "You said I was the bridge, the doorway. But I didn't mean to open it. I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing." The figure's laugh was a low rumble, like thunder rolling across the sky. "You never do, Max. None of us ever do. You thought you could control it, but you cannot. The abyss doesn't need your permission. It doesn't care for your understanding. It simply is. And you are a part of it now." Max's mind felt like it was splitting apart. The figure's words were drowning him, sinking into his consciousness like heavy stones. The truth was crashing down around him and he was suffocating beneath it. There was no escape from the void. No escape from what he had become. He had opened the door and now he was the one who would decide who crossed through it. The darkness around him deepened, thickening like fog, until it seemed to fill every inch of the world. The air was so heavy now that it felt like it was pressing against his chest, squeezing the breath out of him. The lost souls, their whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of desperate cries that filled the air, their pleas for release becoming louder and more frantic with every passing second. And then, in the center of it all, a new presence emerged. It was not the figure, not the ancient being who had guided him here. No, this was something else, something darker, something older. The shadows parted, revealing a face. It was monstrous, its eyes glowing with an unearthly fire. Its features were contorted, twisted into something barely human. The mouth was a cavern of jagged teeth, a hollow, empty grin that seemed to stretch impossibly wide. It was not a face Max recognized, but it was familiar. It was the thing that had been lurking in the darkness all along. The thing that had been watching him, waiting for him. The thing that had always been there, but that he had never truly seen until now. "I am the one who waits," the thing rasped, its voice a low, guttural growl. "I am the true master of the abyss, the one who holds the key to all things lost. You have opened the door, Max. And now, you will be the one to decide what comes through." Max's chest tightened, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps as the weight of the creature's presence pressed down on him. The abyss had been here all along, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to claim him. And now the moment had come. "You cannot escape," the creature whispered, its voice like a slow, creeping poison. "You are mine now, Max. You are the key to the void. And soon, you will bring forth what waits in the dark." Max's heart raced, his mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The abyss had consumed him. It had claimed him just as it had claimed the souls before him. There was no escape. There was no return. He was trapped in this place, this nightmare, and he would be the one to open the way for others to follow. The lost souls screamed in the distance, their cries growing louder, but all Max could hear now was the voice of the creature in the darkness. And it was calling him closer. The shadows swirled around Max, thick and oppressive, their fingers creeping over his skin like cold, clammy hands. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out everything but the deep, unsettling growl of the creature. Its presence felt overwhelming, suffocating, like a weight pressing down on him from all sides, forcing him into submission. He could feel the abyss in his bones, an inescapable force wrapping around him, coiling tightly with every breath. Max's chest constricted as the creature's laughter vibrated through the air, sending chills down his spine. The voices of the lost souls, those trapped in the void before him, rose in a chorus of wails, their desperate cries filling the empty expanse. Their agony was palpable, almost physical, wrapping around him like the darkness itself. He could feel their longing, their despair, their desperation to escape the suffocating blackness that held them captive. The creature's glowing eyes bored into him, unblinking, burning with an unnatural fire. It stepped closer, its form impossibly large, towering over him like a mountain of darkness. Its presence was so immense that it felt as though the very air around him was warping, bending under the weight of it. "You were always meant for this," the creature murmured, its voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground, rattling Max's very soul. "You thought you were running from it. You thought you could hide. But the void doesn't let go of those it claims. And you, Max, have been claimed." Max felt his legs tremble, his body betraying him, unwilling to face the terrible truth in front of him. He had been marked by the void from the moment he opened the box, from the instant he let the darkness in. He had been a vessel for the power, the gateway for the lost souls, and now he was the one who would lead them. But could he? Could he bring them into the world of the living? Could he be the one to open the floodgates and unleash whatever horrors waited on the other side? Max staggered back, his body weak, his mind spiraling out of control. "No," he gasped, his voice cracking with desperation. I can't do this. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be a part of this." The creature's smile grew wider, its teeth sharp and gleaming like jagged stones. "It doesn't matter what you wanted, Max. The moment you stepped into this world, you became part of it. The box has chosen you, and you will fulfill the purpose it has set for you." Max shook his head violently, his thoughts clouded by panic and dread. He wanted to run, to escape, but the pull of the abyss was too strong. He could feel it tightening around him, suffocating him, drawing him closer to the edge of the void. There was no running. There was no escape. He had already crossed the threshold. "You will open the door," the creature whispered, its voice now a low, hypnotic chant that seemed to fill the very air around him. "You will bring forth what lies in the dark. And when you do, Max, when you open the gates, you will become one with it. The abyss will be yours to command. The souls will be yours to lead. And all that was lost will be found." Max's mind reeled at the thought. Command the abyss? Lead the souls? What had he become? He was no longer just a man. He was the keeper, the doorway between two worlds. The lost souls, the creatures of the void, they were all part of him now, part of the path he had set in motion. His body felt like it was being torn in two, his very essence being pulled in opposite directions. He could feel the darkness inside him, clawing at the edges of his consciousness, urging him to give in, to embrace what he had become. But there was still a small part of him, a tiny flicker of resistance, fighting to hold on to the remnants of who he once was. "No," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "I won't do it. I won't open the door. I won't let them through." The creature's gaze intensified, and Max could feel the full weight of its stare pressing against him. "You have no choice, Max. You are the key. The lock has already been turned, and the door has already begun to open. You cannot stop what has been set in motion." Max felt a sickening lurch in his stomach, the darkness pressing in on him from all sides. The lost souls, the whispers, their cries for release, they were filling him, consuming him. He could feel them inside him, clawing at his mind, at his very being, desperate to break free. And the pull of the abyss, that cold, eternal void, it was all around him, dragging him closer to the precipice. "This is the price of knowledge," the creature said, its voice dripping with malice. "You wanted to understand. You wanted to see the truth. And now you must bear the weight of it. The weight of the void. The weight of the lost souls. They are yours, Max. Yours to command." Max's chest tightened as he tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, suffocating. The creature was right. He had wanted to understand. He had opened the box because he needed to know. He thought that if he understood the abyss, if he uncovered the mysteries of the lost souls, that he could somehow control it. But now he saw the horrible truth. There was no control. There was no understanding. The abyss wasn't something to be mastered. It was something to be feared. "I won't let you win," Max muttered, his voice hoarse with terror. "I won't become part of this. I won't open the door." But the creature's laughter only deepened, echoing around him like 1,000 voices laughing in unison. "You already have, Max. The door is already open. And now all that remains is for you to walk through it." Max's vision blurred, and he felt a strange sense of dizziness wash over him. The abyss was all around him now, consuming the world. The ground beneath him shifted and cracked as the darkness began to creep up, swallowing the edges of the ravine. The lost souls, No, the beings of the void, they were beginning to emerge. Their forms were indistinct, blurry, but he could feel them, their cold presence pushing against him, demanding release. Max's hands shook violently, his body trembling as the weight of the decision pressed down on him. He could feel the cold grip of the abyss tightening around him. The voices were louder now, deafening, the cries of the lost souls filling his mind with a terrible urgency. They were waiting for him to make the choice, waiting for him to decide who would be freed and who would be trapped forever. The creature watched him, its eyes glowing with an unholy fire. Time is running out, Max. You cannot hold back the flood forever. You will make your choice. Max closed his eyes, trying to block out the voices, trying to block out the suffocating pull of the abyss. But it was no use. The darkness was inside him now. It was him. And no matter how hard he fought, no matter how desperately he resisted, he knew deep down that the door was already open. The void was already creeping into the world of the living. And soon it would be unstoppable. Max's thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion, panic, and a kind of terrible clarity. He could feel the abyss inside him, a vast, dark weight pressing against the walls of his consciousness. It was no longer a place, no longer a thing outside him, but a force within him as inseparable from his soul as the blood in his veins. He could feel the cold, twisting power of it wrapping around his very essence, coiling around his heart and mind, dragging him toward the inevitable. The creature loomed above him, its eyes burning through the darkness, its presence so overwhelming that it felt as if the very fabric of reality was buckling under its weight. Max wanted to scream, to lash out, to defy it, but the words caught in his throat. It was no use. He had opened the door. He had become the bridge. And now there was no escaping it. The abyss was pulling at him like a tide rising higher and higher, threatening to drown him in its depths. The whispers, the cries, the wails of the lost souls, they were everywhere now, their voices melding into one deafening cacophony that vibrated through every fiber of his being. They were inside him, suffocating him, their desperation pressing in from all sides. Please. Max gasped, his voice barely a whisper, lost in the overwhelming sound of the abyss. Please stop. The creature's laugh rumbled through the air again, deep and guttural, like the sound of distant thunder. It stepped closer, its massive form blocking out everything else, leaving Max feeling as if he were standing alone in the universe, with nothing but the void and the creature watching him, waiting for him to make the final decision. You cannot bargain with it, the creature's voice dripped with cruel amusement. The abyss is not something you can negotiate with. It is not a thing you can control. It does not care about your pleas, Max. It has taken you, and now you must accept what you have become. You are the keeper, the guardian, the bridge, the one who decides who enters and who remains behind. Max's knees buckled under him, and he collapsed to the ground, the weight of the creature's words pressing down on him like a physical force. His mind reeled, unable to process the enormity of it all. He was the one who decided. He was the one who would choose who crossed over and who stayed in the void. The power, the responsibility, the consequences, it was all his now. And yet he felt nothing. No power, no control, just fear. A deep, paralyzing fear that curled in his gut, that ate at his insides like a worm burrowing through flesh. What was he supposed to do? How could he bear the weight of such a choice? To open the floodgates of the abyss, to release the souls trapped in the dark, would be to unleash something unspeakable. Something that could tear apart the fabric of reality itself. But to keep them locked away? To hold the door shut? Could he live with the knowledge that he had condemned these souls to an eternity of torment? He couldn't bear the thought. The creature's eyes narrowed as it watched him, the light within them flickering with something dark, something ancient. The choice is yours, Max. You will decide. And once you do, there will be no turning back. Max felt his breath quicken, his hands trembling as he clutched at the ground beneath him. The earth beneath him was no longer solid. It felt like sand, like it was slipping away, crumbling under the pressure of what he was about to do. There was no turning back. There never had been. The whispers in his mind were becoming louder, more urgent, their cries for release pushing against the walls of his sanity. They were so desperate now, so filled with agony, that Max could feel their pain tearing at him, raking at his soul. They wanted to be free. But if he opened the door, if he unleashed them, he knew what would happen. The creature stepped closer, its massive form looming over him. Its voice was like a low hum in the back of his mind, pressing him further into despair. Do you feel it, Max? Do you feel the weight of it? Max didn't answer. His breath came in ragged gasps, his vision blurring as the weight of the abyss pressed down on him, the lost souls crying out, the creature watching, waiting. The air around him seemed to vibrate with the dark energy, with the presence of something ancient, something primordial. "You are the keeper now," the creature whispered, its voice dripping with dark satisfaction. "You will decide who enters the void. You will decide who remains in the dark. It is your choice, your burden." Max shook his head, his heart pounding in his chest. "I don't want this. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be the keeper. I didn't want to make these choices." "But you already have," the creature said, its voice a low, comforting murmur. "The moment you opened the box, the moment you stepped into this world, you made your choice. You have been chosen. You are part of the abyss now, Max. You are part of the void." The ground beneath him shifted again, cracking, splitting like a wound being torn open. Max fell forward, his hands reaching for something solid, but there was nothing. The world around him was collapsing, unraveling at the seams. The abyss was consuming everything. "What will you do, Max?" the creature's voice echoed, the words stretching out into the infinite darkness. "Will you open the door? Will you release them? Or will you condemn them all to eternal darkness?" Max's body trembled as he forced himself to stand, his legs weak, his mind on the edge of breaking. He could feel the presence of the abyss growing stronger with every passing moment, like it was pushing him to make the choice, to take the step. He could hear the souls calling out to him, feel their pain, their desperation. But there was something else too, something far darker, calling from the depths of the void. Max took a deep breath, his hands shaking as he reached out into the blackness, his heart racing. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he was strong enough to make the right choice. But in the depths of his soul, he felt a pull toward the void, toward the darkness that had claimed him. It was more than fear. It was the promise of something greater, the promise of power, the promise of release. The door was opening, Max realized. There was no stopping it, and he had to decide. Max felt the abyss inside him, pulsing like a heartbeat. It wasn't just a place anymore. It was a presence, a dark, writhing force that had taken root in his soul. The weight of the choice before him pressed against his mind, every whisper of the lost souls, every breath of the dark entity, each one pulling him in different directions. It was suffocating. The air around him was thick with pressure, and each passing moment felt like an eternity. The voices of the souls, so desperate, so filled with pain, seemed to grow louder and louder in his ears. Their cries echoed in his mind, a constant barrage of anguish. They wanted to be free. They wanted to escape the endless torment of the void. Max could feel their collective will, their desperation, a rising tide that threatened to drown him. But then there was the other force, the one that had first emerged when he stepped into this world. The thing that had been waiting. The true master of the abyss. Its presence was colder than ice, darker than the deepest night. It was not a soul, not a spirit. It was something older, something far more ancient, something that had always existed, hidden beneath the surface of the world. "You feel it now, don't you?" The creature's voice, low and sinister, rumbled in his mind. "The weight of your decision. The cost of your choice. You will open the door, Max. You will release the souls. You will become part of the darkness." Max's hands were trembling as they clutched at the edge of the ground beneath him, the earth crumbling away like sand. His head swam. His heart raced in his chest. He wanted to scream, to shout at the creature, to defy it, to tell it that he couldn't do this, that he wouldn't let the abyss swallow him whole. But there was a pull, an undeniable magnetic pull, drawing him toward the void, drawing him toward the thing that waited for him, that had waited for him. The thing that had always known he would open the door, that had known he would become part of this, part of it. Max closed his eyes, trying to block out the screams of the lost souls, but they were inside him now, swirling through his thoughts like a relentless storm. He couldn't escape them. He couldn't escape this. He had opened the door and there was no way back. "You cannot hide from the truth," the creature's voice whispered again, its words dripping with dark satisfaction. "You are the key. You are the one who decides. You open the door and now it is time to release them. You cannot resist. You cannot escape." Max's chest tightened. His thoughts felt like they were slipping away, like they were being pulled into the abyss, swallowed by the endless void. He tried to steady his breath, to hold on to his sanity, but it was becoming harder with every passing second. The entity's eyes, those eyes that burned with an unholy fire, seemed to pierce through him, stripping away his resistance, his last vestiges of hope. The air was thick with the scent of decay, of something ancient and decayed, something beyond time. The abyss was not just a place, it was a force, an entity in its own right. And it wanted him. It needed him. Max's knees gave way and he fell to the ground, his hands gripping the earth as if it might hold him in place. But the earth was crumbling beneath him, the very foundation of reality slipping away. He could feel it now, the pull of the void, the weight of the darkness, like it was reaching up through the ground to drag him down. The creature moved closer, its presence more suffocating, more oppressive. "You are the keeper now, Max," it whispered, its voice like a cold wind in his ear. "You are the one who decides who will pass into the darkness, who will remain behind. You are the bridge." Max felt his chest constrict, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His mind felt like it was being torn apart, stretched too thin. He could feel the abyss deep inside him, clawing at his thoughts, at his sanity. He was no longer just a man. He was the keeper of the void. He had opened the door, and now the darkness was inside him. "You will decide," the creature continued, its voice a low growl. "The lost souls are waiting for you. They will be freed, and the abyss will claim what it is due." Max's vision blurred as he tried to push himself back to his feet, but it was no use. The ground beneath him continued to shift and crack, and the abyss seemed to stretch out before him, a yawning chasm of blackness. His hands reached out, but there was nothing to grab, no way to hold on. The voices of the lost souls screamed louder, their cries becoming a deafening roar in his ears. They were pleading with him, begging for release. The creature's presence was a weight, a pressure on his soul, but the souls, their agony, their terror, was more than he could bear. Max closed his eyes, trying to block out the sound, trying to block out the creature, the abyss, the weight of it all. He couldn't decide. He couldn't choose. The burden of it was too much. But the creature would not let him go. It was inside him now, urging him on, pushing him toward the precipice. "There is no turning back," the creature said, its voice deep and final. "You have made your choice. The door is open. The souls are waiting. And now they will be freed." Max felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if something had ripped open inside him, something raw and exposed. He gasped for breath, his body racked with tremors. The abyss was inside him. The lost souls were inside him. They were calling to him, and he had the power to free them. But what would that mean? What would it mean to open the door completely? To release the souls trapped in the void? He could feel the weight of the decision now, heavier than anything he had ever known. The abyss wasn't just a place, it was a force. And once it was released, once the souls were freed, there would be no turning back. There would be no controlling what came through. Max's hands gripped his chest, and he could feel the darkness spreading, like ink staining his thoughts. He felt himself slipping. He felt himself becoming something else, something that belonged to the abyss. And then, with the weight of the decision crushing him, he understood. It wasn't just about opening the door. It was about becoming the door. The voices screamed in his mind, their desperation now a blinding light in his consciousness. The abyss was coming, and it would take everything. Max closed his eyes. The choice had been made, and he had become the key. Max felt the abyss stretch wide inside him, vast and unending, its darkness pressing against every corner of his mind. It was as though the very fabric of his soul had been torn open, the edges fraying, unraveling under the weight of his decisions. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, drowning out everything but the crushing silence that surrounded him. He was the keeper now, the gatekeeper of the void. The weight of the responsibility crushed him, but more terrifying was the understanding that he could never undo what had already been set in motion. The creature's presence lingered like an oppressive fog, suffocating him with its cold, ancient energy. Its eyes, glowing like twin embers, pierced through the darkness, staring into him with an intensity that felt like it could strip him bare. It was the embodiment of the abyss, an entity older than time itself, and now Max was bound to it. "The door is open," the creature's voice rumbled in his mind, deep and resonant, like the groan of the earth itself. "You have unlocked it. The souls are waiting, and now you will release them. You are the bridge, Max. You are the one who chooses." Max's hands shook violently as he tried to grasp onto any semblance of control, but it was slipping away faster than he could hold it. The world around him seemed to distort, the ground beneath him warping as though reality itself was coming apart at the seams. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. All he could hear were the screams, the endless, tortured wails of the lost souls, their voices merging into a deafening roar in his head. They were everywhere now, their cries echoing through the dark expanse. They clawed at his mind, their desperation reverberating through every thought, every nerve. Max could feel them inside him, their anguish bleeding into his soul, eating away at the fragments of his humanity. They were not just trapped in the void, they were becoming him. They were merging with him, turning him into something unrecognizable. "Please," He whispered hoarsely, his voice barely audible over the tumult of voices. "Please stop." But there was no answer. No respite. The abyss was inside him now. He could feel the cold touch of it, wrapping around his heart, squeezing tighter with every passing moment. His mind, once his own, was no longer his. It was becoming something else, something darker. The lost souls, the void, they were filling every corner of his thoughts, until there was no space left for him, for his self. It was as though he had been erased, replaced by the darkness. Max's breath came in ragged gasps, his chest heaving with the effort to hold on to something, anything, that still resembled his former self. His fingers dug into the ground, the dirt beneath his nails, but it felt like nothing was solid anymore. It was all crumbling, falling apart, slipping through his grasp. The creature stepped closer, its massive form blotting out the remnants of the sky, casting everything into shadow. Its presence was overwhelming, suffocating. Its voice was a deep, resounding growl that vibrated in Max's bones. "You are the keeper now, Max," it said again, its words smooth like a dark lullaby. "The bridge between two worlds. You are the one who will decide what comes through. You will release them, or you will keep them locked away. Either way, you are bound to the void now. And once you have made your choice, you will become part of it forever." Max felt a cold sweat break out across his skin, his body trembling as the reality of what he had become settled in. There was no escape. He couldn't turn back. He had opened the door. He had stepped across the threshold, and now he was tied to the abyss. He had become its keeper, its master. "What are they?" Max gasped, his voice raw and desperate. "What are these souls? Why can't I let them go?" The creature's eyes glinted with something that could almost be mistaken for amusement. "They are the lost ones, Max. The ones who have fallen through the cracks of time, trapped in the space between life and death. The abyss is where they reside now, and it is your duty to release them, or to hold them here in this eternal limbo." Max's mind reeled. They weren't just trapped in the void. They were bound to him now. He could feel their pain, their terror, their endless cries for release. It was as if they had fused with him, woven into the very fabric of his being. "I can't do this," Max whispered, his throat tight with terror. "I can't choose. I can't let them through. But I can't keep them here either." The creature's smile spread wide like a dark promise. "You already have, Max. The door is open. You are the one who decides who crosses through, who is freed and who remains. And in doing so, you will become one with the void. The darkness will be yours to command." Max felt a surge of desperation clawing at him. He had opened the door, yes, but he had not asked for this. He had not asked to be this. The keeper of souls. The master of the void. He had never wanted the power. He had never wanted to be a part of this dark, twisted world. And yet it was already too late. "Please," he begged again, his voice breaking. "Let them go. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be you." The creature's laugh reverberated through the air, low and sinister. "You are already mine, Max. You are all of us. You have already made your choice. You have opened the door. And now the abyss has claimed you. There is no going back. There is no redemption." Max's heart hammered in his chest, his mind spinning with the weight of the decision that had been placed upon him. There was no right answer. No escape. The abyss would take what it had come for. The souls would be freed, or they would remain trapped eternally inside him. And he would be their keeper, their ruler, or their judge. The abyss was already inside him, wrapping itself around his heart, binding him to its will. The darkness was so thick now, so overwhelming that it felt like he was drowning. His breath came in shallow gasps, his hands clutching at his chest as the void inside him seemed to expand, to swallow him whole. He had become the key, the door, the bridge, and in doing so he had lost himself. The weight of it, the burden of it, crushed him. "Release them," the creature whispered, "or keep them. The choice is yours. But once you have made it, you will never be the same again." Max closed his eyes, feeling the crushing weight of the abyss, the endless darkness pulling at him, consuming him. He had no choice. There was no turning back. He was the keeper now, and the door would open. Max's mind was no longer his own. It had been overtaken, consumed by the abyss, and every breath he took seemed to echo through the vast emptiness around him. His chest felt heavy, his lungs tight as if the very air itself was a poison, suffocating him from the inside. His body was trembling uncontrollably, his hands shaking as they gripped the earth beneath him. But the ground, the world itself, was slipping away. The more he held on, the less he felt grounded. The creature's eyes burned into him, its cold gaze like a blade cutting through the fog in his mind. "You have opened the door, Max," it said, its voice smooth and seductive, like a lullaby tinged with venom. "Now you must choose what will pass through. What will you let into this world?" Max could feel the pull of the abyss in every fiber of his being, the dark weight of it pressing down on him, dragging him deeper into the void. He could hear the cries of the lost souls, their desperate screams for release, growing louder, more frantic. They had been trapped for so long, locked away in this eternal limbo, waiting for someone like Max to come along, to choose their fate. And now that someone was him. The pressure was unbearable. Every part of him screamed to fight back, to reject the abyss, to find some way to escape this nightmare, but there was nowhere to run. He had crossed the threshold, opened the door, and now he stood at the edge, facing the terrible truth. He was the keeper of the void. The souls, the darkness, they were his to command, his to release or imprison. "Please," Max whispered, his voice ragged, barely more than a breath. "I don't want this. I can't make this choice." The creature leaned forward, its immense form blocking out everything else, its eyes glinting with dark amusement. "You have already made it," it replied, its voice low and insistent, like a serpent coiling around him. "The moment you opened the door, you made the choice. The abyss is part of you now, Max. And in choosing, you will become the abyss. You will become what waits in the dark." Max's hands clutched at his head, the pressure inside him building to a fever pitch. The void was spreading, like ink seeping through his veins, and he could feel it calling to him. He was no longer just a man. He was a vessel for something ancient, something terrible. The darkness, the lost souls, they were inside him, taking over, drowning him in their misery. He could feel them, all of them, pressing in, their cries overwhelming his mind, his soul. They were desperate. They were lost. They had been trapped here in this twisted realm between life and death for so long, and they wanted out. They wanted to be free. And Max had the power to give them that freedom. But at what cost? "They will be freed," the creature whispered, its voice like a warm, dark caress. "If you open the door, if you release them, they will return to the world. They will walk among the living once more. You will have done what the abyss has been waiting for, and in return, you will take your place among us. You will be the keeper for all eternity." Max's heart raced as his mind teetered on the brink. He felt like he was drowning, caught in the maelstrom of the souls, their agony consuming him from the inside out. Their voices were deafening now, a cacophony of screams, sobs, and wails, their pain reverberating through his very bones. He wanted to shout, to tell them to be quiet, to leave him alone, but their cries were too much. He could feel their desperation. They wanted to be free. They wanted out of this suffocating darkness, and they were begging him to set them free. "Max," the creature rumbled, its voice a deep, echoing growl that shook the very air. "You are the one who decides. You are the keeper. The one who opens the door or the one who locks it shut. It is your choice. You are the bridge between two worlds, the living and the lost. And once you make your decision, once the door is open, there will be no turning back." Max closed his eyes, his mind reeling, his thoughts a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and sorrow. He didn't want this. He didn't want the power, the responsibility. He just wanted to be free. He wanted to live. But the door was already open. The lost souls were already inside him. Their agony, their pain, it was now a part of him. He could feel it gnawing at his sanity, at his very being. They wanted release. They needed it. And he was the one who held the key. "If I open the door," Max whispered, his voice trembling with fear and resolve, "what will come through? What will I unleash?" The creature's grin widened, its eyes glimmering with dark promise. "What will come through is the abyss, Max. The darkness. The things that have been trapped in the void. The lost ones, the forgotten, the forsaken. The monsters and horrors that wait just beyond the veil. They will walk again. They will return to the world of the living. And you, Max, you will be the one who lets them through." Max's stomach churned, his head spinning with the implications of what the creature was saying. He could feel the pull of the abyss, the dark energy calling to him, coaxing him to open the door completely. But if he did, what would come through? What would he unleash upon the world? "You already know the answer," the creature's voice crooned, its tone soothing, almost comforting. "You can feel it in your bones. You can feel the power of the abyss. You can feel the souls pushing at the edges of your mind, waiting to be freed. You are their master now. You are the keeper." Max could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, like a 1,000-ton stone sitting on his chest. He was the keeper. He was the one who held the power to free the lost souls, or condemn them to an eternity of torment. The abyss was inside him. It was a part of him now. And the world, the very fabric of reality, was hanging in the balance. The souls screamed louder, their voices rising to a fever pitch, urging him to act, to make the choice. They were trapped in him, inside his very soul, and they wanted out. "Release them," the creature whispered, its voice now a dark, hypnotic murmur. "Give them the freedom they desire. Open the door fully. Let them return to the world of the living. And in doing so, you will take your place among the lost. You will become one of them." Max's body trembled as the weight of the abyss settled into his bones. He had become the key, the keeper, the bridge. And now the final choice was his. He could open the door. He could release the souls. But in doing so, he would unleash the darkness upon the world. Or he could keep the door closed, keep the abyss locked away, and imprison the souls forever. There was no right choice. There was only the choice that had to be made. Max's hand reached out, trembling, toward the darkness. And in that moment, he realized that whatever he chose, he would never be the same. Max's hand hovered just inches from the abyss, the blackness swirling around him like a living thing, as if it were waiting for his touch, craving his decision. His heart hammered in his chest, and his thoughts were so scattered, so broken, that it was almost impossible to focus. The creature loomed beside him, its presence a constant, unyielding weight, pushing him toward the edge. The souls, they were still screaming, crying out for release, their voices echoing through his mind like 1,000 desperate whispers. The abyss was inside him now. It had become a part of him. His breath came in ragged gasps as he struggled to hold on to his fading sense of self. He could feel it, the darkness, spreading through his veins, consuming his thoughts, his very essence. It was as if his soul was dissolving, fragmenting under the weight of the decision that had been placed on him. The creature's eyes gleamed in the darkness, bright like twin stars, watching him with an unsettling, patient hunger. It knew what he was thinking. It knew the torment that he was enduring, the crushing weight of the choice before him. It relished in his confusion, his fear. Max's mind was a tangled mess of regret, fear, and anguish, and all the while, the abyss was waiting for him to choose. "Max," the creature said, its voice a slow, deliberate whisper that seemed to echo in every corner of his mind. "You feel the pull, don't you? You feel it in your bones. The abyss is calling to you. It wants you. It wants you to become part of it. It wants you to open the door completely, to release the souls, to let the darkness flood back into the world." Max's breath caught in his throat. The souls were alive in him now, trapped in him, and their pain, their desperation, it was suffocating him. Every second he hesitated, they clawed at his mind, their cries growing louder, more frantic. The guilt, the weight of their suffering, it was all his now. But the creature was right. He could feel it, the allure of the abyss, its terrible magnetic pull. It promised power. It promised freedom. But it also promised destruction. It promised darkness, an eternal night that would swallow everything in its path. "Don't you want to feel it?" the creature cooed, its voice like silk over steel. "The power. The release. You could rule it, Max. You could be more than just a man. You could be a god." Max's hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into the soft, crumbling earth beneath him. The ground was slick with something cold, something that felt like oil or ink, and it was spreading across the ground, consuming everything. The abyss was spilling into the world of the living. And Max could feel it. He could feel the rift opening wider, the pull of it growing stronger, more urgent. But with every breath, he remembered what was at stake. If he opened the door fully, if he released the souls, if he let the abyss spill out into the world, what would happen? What would come through? He could already feel the tremors beneath his feet, the earth shifting, warping, breaking apart. The world was on the edge of something terrible, something beyond his control, beyond his understanding. The creature was right about one thing. He was the bridge. He was the one who held the power to open the door, or to lock it. And whatever came through would be because of his choice. He would be the one to unleash it. He would be the one to change everything. Max squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the screams of the souls, their cries becoming a pounding beat in his skull. The desperation, the pain, they were becoming a part of him too, wrapping around his thoughts, wrapping around his heart. But even as they tore at him, something else stirred within him. Resistance. A small spark, a flicker of who he used to be. He didn't want this. He didn't want to open the door. He didn't want the power. He didn't want to become the keeper of this nightmare. But the longer he waited, the more the abyss seemed to claim him. The darkness was crawling under his skin, filling his veins with cold dread, and the souls, they were inside him, screaming for freedom, for release. "What will it be, Max?" the creature asked, its voice calm and soothing like a dark lullaby. "Will you open the door? Will you release them?" Max shook his head, the pressure inside him growing unbearable. He couldn't do this. He couldn't open the door and unleash the abyss on the world. But could he bear to keep it locked away, to imprison the souls forever? Could he condemn them to eternal torment? Could he live with the guilt of that? No. Max gasped, his voice hoarse, ragged. I won't open the door. I won't let it out. I won't be your bridge. But as the words left his lips, he felt the ground tremble beneath him. The earth cracked, the sound like thunder, and the very air seemed to warp, to twist, as though the fabric of reality was stretching, tearing apart. The abyss was pushing its way through, forcing itself into the world. Max's body was shaking violently now, his knees buckling beneath him as the power of the void surged within him. The souls, they were too much. The pressure was overwhelming. He could feel them, feel their presence inside him, like 1,000 sharp needles piercing his thoughts, his soul. They were demanding release, and the more he fought it, the stronger they became. He could feel the door widening, the rift growing larger, stretching open like a wound in the fabric of existence. The abyss was going to spill into the world, whether he wanted it to or not. The souls were going to be freed. Max's breath came in desperate, shallow gasps, his heart thundering in his chest. His hand hovered once more above the rift, trembling as the pull grew stronger, the darkness calling to him, begging him to make the final choice. Let me go, one of the souls whispered inside his mind, its voice soft, filled with sorrow and pain. Please, we have suffered long enough. Free us. Open the door. The pressure in Max's chest tightened. His body was no longer his own. He could feel the abyss inside him, pushing, tearing at him. The darkness wanted him to open the door. It wanted him to let the souls pass through, to release them into the world. But what would come through once he did? What would he unleash? Max could feel the rift widening. The creature was waiting. The abyss was waiting. The souls were waiting. And Max, he was on the brink of losing everything. Max's mind was unraveling. Every instinct, every ounce of his being screamed to stop, to shut the door, to keep the abyss locked away forever. But the weight of the decision, the pull of the darkness, was too strong. The ground beneath him was no longer solid, no longer a thing of reality. It felt like a thin veil, like the ground itself was fading into the void. The rift, the abyss, was tearing through the world, and Max was its keeper, its chosen one. Release us, Max, came the voice again, whispering from inside his skull, a tortured plea filled with centuries of pain. The souls, trapped in the dark void, were no longer just voices to him. They were inside him, woven into his thoughts, into his very soul. Their agony was his agony. Their cries for release were now his own. And the darkness, it was creeping, curling around his heart, around his thoughts, dragging him into its depths. Please, another soul begged, its voice quieter now, as if it had no strength left to scream. Set us free. Max's hands clenched into fists, his body trembling violently with the effort to hold on to what little control he had left. His breath came in shallow gasps, each inhale a fight, each exhale a surrender. The door, that horrible, terrible rift, was growing wider, pulling him toward it, demanding that he choose. But what was left to choose? He could already feel the abyss inside him, growing, expanding. The souls, their voices swirling in a never-ending vortex of agony and desperation, were overwhelming him. His mind was stretched thin, fractured, unable to keep up with the terror that was unfolding. The creature stood silently beside him, a shadow in the darkness, its eyes glinting with something like anticipation. It had been waiting for this moment, for Max to make his choice. You can feel it, can't you? The creature's voice was a velvet whisper, low and intimate, the words curling into Max's thoughts like smoke. You are part of the abyss now. The door is open. You will be the one to decide who passes through. You will be the one to decide who returns to the world of the living. Max swallowed hard, his throat dry, his chest tightening with the weight of it all. He didn't want to be this. He didn't want to be the keeper of souls, the bridge between the worlds of life and death. He didn't want the power that had been thrust upon him, didn't want to be the one to open the floodgates of the abyss. But he had opened it already. The door was cracked wide enough that there was no turning back. The winds picked up, howling through the trees, rattling the leaves in a frenzy of movement. The rain, which had been soft at first, began to pour down in torrents, slashing through the air like needles, washing away the remnants of the world. The sky had darkened further, the clouds swirling in unnatural patterns, a storm that seemed to rise up from the very depths of the void itself. Max could hear it now, the sound of something beyond this world, something ancient and terrible. It was rising, the abyss was rising with the storm. The door was widening, tearing apart the fabric of reality itself. The creature stood beside him, a towering figure in the storm, its presence too vast to ignore. Its voice boomed over the wind and rain, its words echoing like a thunderclap. The time has come, Max. You will open the door fully. You will unleash what waits in the dark. The souls will return. The void will reclaim its prize. Max's heart raced, his chest tight as if he were suffocating. The pull was stronger now, so strong that it felt as if he were being torn apart. He could feel the abyss pressing on his bones, on his skin, its cold touch seeping into his very soul. The lost souls, his souls, screamed louder, their voices mingling with the howling winds, the sound of rain pounding against his ears. They were inside him, a part of him. He couldn't escape them. He felt a surge of anger rise within him. "I don't want this," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the wind. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be the keeper of the void. I didn't ask for any of this." The creature's eyes glinted with cruel amusement, its lips curling into a smile. "You were always meant for this, Max. You have always been part of the abyss. The moment you opened the door, you sealed your fate. You have become the keeper. You have become the bridge." Max's legs buckled, his knees hitting the ground as the storm seemed to reach a crescendo, the air thick with the sense of something catastrophic about to happen. The wind whipped at his face and the rain stung like 1,000 needles, but the pressure inside him, the growing weight of the abyss, it was unbearable. He couldn't hold on any longer. The darkness around him seemed to pulse, like a living thing reaching out toward him, toward the rift. He could feel the energy building, the surge of power that came from the void, a force that could reshape the world, could destroy it. The door was open. The void was hungry, and Max was its keeper. The creature loomed over him, its voice a whisper in his ear, soft yet filled with terrible finality. "You are the one who decides, Max. You are the one who opens the floodgates. You are the one who will change everything." Max's hand was trembling as he reached out toward the rift. His mind was numb with fear, with terror, but the pull was undeniable. His fingers brushed against the edge of the darkness, and in that moment, everything stopped. The wind stilled. The rain ceased. The cries of the souls fell silent, as if they were holding their breath, waiting. Max closed his eyes, his body trembling, his heart racing. He could feel the abyss inside him, the dark power coursing through his veins. He could feel the souls, their hunger, their desperation. They were a part of him now, and he was their only hope for freedom. But if he opened the door completely, what would come through? What would the abyss unleash on the world? There was no answer. Only the overwhelming pressure, the weight of the choice, and the darkness that waited, patient and cold. Max felt his fingers twitch. The rift was there, just beyond his reach. And the abyss was waiting. Max's hand hovered over the rift, the abyss so close he could almost feel it. The pull, the unrelenting pressure, was overwhelming. His mind was a blur of confusion and terror, his thoughts scattering like leaves in the wind. He felt as though he were standing on the edge of something immeasurable, something far beyond his understanding. The choice, the decision, it was no longer just about opening a door. It was about the very fabric of reality, the balance between worlds, and the chaos that would spill forth if he acted. The creature's presence loomed like a shadow over him, its cold eyes never leaving him, never blinking. The wind had ceased, the rain had stopped, but the air was thick with anticipation, with the sense that someone, was about to break. Max's chest tightened with the weight of it all. The souls, his souls, were still inside him, their pain and desperation gnawing at his consciousness like 1,000 hungry beasts. "Max," the creature's voice rumbled, its words sliding into his thoughts like honey, thick with temptation. "You know what must be done. You can feel the power that waits just beyond that rift. The abyss is calling to you. You are its keeper now. Open the door. Release them. Free the lost souls." Max closed his eyes, trying to block out the creature, trying to block out the mounting pressure that threatened to crush him. But he could feel it. The darkness. The abyss. It was inside him, pulling at his very essence. It was as though his soul was being pulled in two different directions, each one tearing him apart. One part of him wanted to open the door, to let the souls be freed, to end their torment, to end his torment. They had been trapped for so long, had endured so much. He could feel their cries vibrating through his ribs, their desperation rising inside him like an inferno. But what would come through if he released them? What horrors waited beyond the rift, in the blackness? Would he be freeing them, or would he be unleashing an even greater nightmare upon the world? The creature spoke again, its voice a smooth, almost comforting whisper. "The abyss is not evil, Max. It is simply the other side. It is the balance to all that is light. The souls you release, They will walk again, they will live again. They will remember their lives and they will find peace. Max's body was trembling now, his breath shallow, his heart racing. He could feel the energy of the void swirling around him, like a storm building inside of him, within his very bones. He couldn't escape it. There was no turning back. He had already opened the door. The abyss had already taken root within him. The souls were already inside him, their cries too much to bear. "Release them," the creature whispered, its voice now a dark caress. "You will give them what they want. You will free them. And in doing so, you will take your place beside them in the darkness as one of us." Max shook his head, his body racked with pain. The abyss was too much. He had never wanted this. He had never wanted to become the keeper, never wanted to wield such terrible power. But it had all led to this moment. The rift, the darkness, the souls inside him screaming for release. "No," Max gasped, his voice hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "I can't do it. I can't open the door completely. I can't unleash what's waiting on the other side." But the rift widened, the darkness bleeding through like ink spilling from an open jar. Max's body trembled violently, his mind screaming at him to run, to escape. But the pull was too strong. He could feel the darkness pressing on his chest, suffocating him, forcing him to make the decision. The air around him seemed to twist, to shift, as though the very world was bending beneath the weight of the abyss. The ground cracked, deep fissures spreading outward, as if the earth itself were being torn apart by the force of what lay beneath. The wind picked up again, howling through the trees, and the rain began to pour once more, but this time it wasn't just rain. It was dark, black as ink, falling in sheets that seemed to devour the very light. Max's heart pounded in his chest, his body shaking as the storm surged around him, the abyss pressing down on him from every direction. The cries of the souls were deafening now, their wails filling his mind, their voices intertwining with the roar of the storm. He was drowning in their agony. They were begging him, pleading with him. Their voices were no longer separate, but one single, unholy chorus that seemed to fill every crevice of his mind. "Please, set us free. Let us go." Max's breath caught in his throat, his chest tightening as the soul's pain washed over him. He was them. They were him. There was no separation anymore. He could feel their torment, their desperation, their hunger for freedom. But what would he become if he let them go? What would he unleash upon the world? The creature's voice was still there, still echoing in his mind, coaxing him, urging him toward the rift. "The abyss is not to be feared, Max. It is the other side, the mirror of existence. Open the door and you will release them. You will free them from their torment, and in return, you will gain power beyond measure. You will become one with the void. You will become the abyss." Max's hand, shaking uncontrollably, reached out toward the rift. His fingers brushed against the darkness. And in that moment, the world seemed to shudder, to break apart. Time itself felt like it was splintering, as though the very essence of reality was unraveling in his grasp. The darkness was alive now, swirling in response to his touch, and the ground beneath him cracked open, sending jagged fissures sprawling outward. He felt it, the pull. It was irresistible. Like gravity itself had turned on him, dragging him into the void, pulling him down into its depths. The rift widened further, and the darkness began to spill out like ink, filling the air, blackening the sky. The storm raged harder, the winds howling like beasts, and the rain, black, oily, suffocating, poured down with a force Max had never felt before. And then it happened. With a violent crack, the rift tore open fully. The darkness poured through, flooding the land, twisting reality itself, bending it to its will. The souls screamed, their voices rising in a crescendo, their torment now fully realized. They were free. And Max had made his choice. He had unleashed the abyss. Max was no longer sure where he ended and the abyss began. The moment the rift had fully opened, the world around him shattered into chaos. The storm raged like a living thing, the sky now a swirling mass of ink and fire, as though the heavens themselves were being consumed by the darkness. The earth trembled beneath his feet, the ground cracking wide open, swallowing trees, rocks, and anything else that dared to stand in its path. The very air had thickened, becoming heavy with the scent of sulfur and decay, and the darkness now felt like a tangible force pressing down on him from all sides. He could feel it in his chest, the pull of the void, the weight of the souls that had been released. They were no longer trapped inside him, but he could still sense them. Their presence was like a vast ocean beneath the surface of his mind, churning, restless, their cries for release still echoing in his thoughts. But now they were free, and they were no longer just voices. They were real, tangible. They were spilling out into the world. And with them, something darker was awakening. Max's heart pounded in his chest as he staggered backward, his legs weak, his mind reeling. He had opened the door. He had let the abyss through. And now he was standing at the epicenter of a cataclysmic event, unable to undo what he had set into motion. The wind howled through the trees, their branches twisting and snapping as if they were alive, thrashing violently in the tempest. The rain, that black oily downpour, fell in sheets, stinging his skin, leaving marks wherever it touched, as though the very world was being branded. The creature standing beside him had transformed. Its form was no longer just a shadow, a dark figure in the storm. Now it loomed over Max, impossibly tall and monstrous, its eyes burning with an intensity that made the ground tremble. Its smile, a cruel, impossibly wide grin, stretched across its face, its teeth like jagged knives. "You have done it, Max," the creature said, its voice a low, rumbling growl that seemed to resonate from the very earth beneath their feet. "You have opened the door. You have released the abyss. And now, we are free." Max could barely breathe. His chest was constricted, his lungs filling with the black air that surrounded him, suffocating him from within. The pull of the abyss was stronger now, so much stronger. He could feel it, its darkness seeping into him, filling the very core of his being. The power was intoxicating, overwhelming, and it beckoned him, tempting him to succumb. But there was no turning back, no way to take it back. He had made the choice. He had unleashed the void. The souls, they were here now, no longer trapped in the rift. They were walking among the living again, their forms twisting and shifting, blurry figures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Their faces were contorted in agony, their eyes hollow and vacant, as though they had been reborn into something else entirely, something monstrous. Some of them were reaching for the sky, their hands clawing at the air as if trying to grasp onto something, anything, that could anchor them. Others stood motionless, their bodies twisted and distorted, as if they were slowly becoming part of the void itself. Max watched in horror as the land around him began to warp. The once lush, green forest had become a nightmarish landscape, its trees now blackened and charred, their leaves hanging like tattered rags. The ground had split open, huge cracks running through the earth, revealing nothing but a void deeper than the deepest ocean, a chasm that seemed to stretch on forever. But it was more than just the land. The very air itself was changing, shifting in unnatural ways. The sky was a violent swirl of dark clouds, tinged with red and orange as though the world itself was burning. The storm intensified, the winds whipping through the shattered landscape, and the rain, black as night, poured down in torrents, flooding the land, turning everything it touched into something unrecognizable. And there, amidst the chaos, the creature stood, its form towering above everything, its eyes gleaming with cruel delight. "You feel it now, don't you, Max?" it whispered, its voice wrapping around him like a snake, its words dripping with dark satisfaction. "The power. The abyss is yours to command. You are its keeper now. You are the one who has brought it into this world. And now, you will reign." Max staggered backward, his legs failing beneath him. He collapsed to his knees, his hands gripping the wet earth as though trying to anchor himself, but there was no escape. The world had been undone. The abyss was here, and he was its master. But with that mastery came a cost. The souls that had been released were no longer the innocent, the lost. They were twisted now, their forms shifting, their faces changing, morphing into something darker, more monstrous. They were no longer his souls. They were free, but they were no longer human. They were creatures of the void, born of darkness and chaos. Some of them shrieked in agony as their forms dissolved into shadow, while others seemed to reach for Max, their fingers outstretched, their mouths open in silent screams. Max could feel their presence, feel it deep within him, like a growing darkness and endless hunger. He could feel the abyss inside him, tugging at his very soul, trying to pull him into the depths. The creature's voice came again, cold and unfeeling. "You are the bridge, Max, the keeper. The void is now yours to command, and in time, you will come to understand its power. You will come to understand the cost of what you have done." Max's chest tightened with dread. He could feel the abyss filling him, consuming him, turning him into something else, something dark. The power, the knowledge, the weight of it all, it was too much. The world was unrecognizable now, a nightmarish realm where time and space twisted, where nothing was certain, where the boundary between life and death was gone. The very nature of existence had been fractured. Max tried to breathe, but it felt as though the air itself was suffocating him. The abyss was inside him, filling every crevice of his soul, corrupting him. It was too much. He couldn't control it. It was slipping through his fingers, expanding, consuming, until there was nothing left. And then, as the storm raged above, Max understood the terrible truth. There was no going back. The world had been changed forever. And he was its lord now. But in that realization, he also understood something deeper, something more terrifying. The abyss had never been a force that could be controlled. It was a force that controlled him. The void was inside him, and it was beginning to consume him. Max could feel it now, coursing through his veins like liquid fire, like poison. The abyss was alive inside him, pulsing, twisting, as if it were hungry for him. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, each inhale a struggle, each exhale a surrender. The world around him had become an unbearable nightmare, a landscape of blackened trees, shattered earth, and a sky that churned with violent, red-tinted clouds. It felt as though the very fabric of reality had been torn apart, unraveling at the seams, and there was no way to repair it. The storm, now raging with impossible fury, cracked the air with each rumble of thunder, each bolt of lightning. The winds howled like wild beasts, whipping through the wreckage, and the rain, dark, oily, and suffocating, poured down in torrents, soaking him to the bone. The ground beneath him shifted, trembled, as if the earth itself were trying to reject what had been done to it. But Max could no longer focus on the world around him. No, his attention was consumed by the abyss inside him, its presence growing stronger with every passing moment. It wasn't just power, it was hunger. The abyss wanted to devour him, wanted to erase him from existence, to turn him into one of the things he had just released. It was pulling at him, twisting his mind, his very soul, until he felt like he was no longer sure where he ended and the darkness began. "You are mine now, Max," the creature's voice whispered, cold and hollow, its words reverberating in the storm like an ancient chant. "You are the keeper, the bridge, the one who has opened the door. And now, the void will consume you as it has consumed all." Max's hands trembled as he placed them on the cold, cracked earth, struggling to maintain some shred of reality, some connection to the world he had once known. The pain inside him was unbearable, a pressure so intense that it felt as though his chest would explode. He could feel the abyss clawing at the edges of his mind, trying to invade every thought, every corner of his consciousness. It was taking him piece by piece. His heart was pounding, his thoughts scattered, but one thought remained clear above all others. This wasn't power. This was corruption. The void had seeped into him, turned him into something monstrous, something other. It had whispered to him, promised him freedom, but all it had brought was a slow, torturous descent into madness. He was no longer just a man. He was a vessel, a broken vessel, overflowing with the darkness he had unleashed upon the world. And the worst part? He was aware of it. He was still in control, still trapped in his own mind, but the abyss was closing in on him, and with each passing second, it became harder to hold on to himself. "You can't fight it," the creature's voice purred, almost soothing as it towered over him. It seemed to grow larger, its form becoming a swirling mass of shadows and tendrils that flickered in and out of existence. "You have already crossed the threshold. The abyss is inside you, and it will always be a part of you. You will never escape it, Max. You will never be free." Max's vision blurred, his eyes stinging from the rain, the oppressive weight of the abyss pressing down on him. He could hear the souls, the lost souls, shrieking, their cries now distorted and warped, echoing in the storm like tortured wails. Their forms were no longer human, their faces twisted and monstrous, as though they had been shaped by the very darkness they had been freed into. Some of them moved toward him, their twisted hands reaching out, their eyes wide and hollow, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. Max could feel the pull of them, feel the abyss in them, and it terrified him. These were not the souls he had once felt sympathy for. These were not the innocent ones. These were the corrupted, the twisted, the broken. "You see them now, don't you?" The creature's voice was a soft, mocking whisper in his ear. "They are your creations, Max. You freed them. You brought them into this world. You gave them form, and now they will follow you, for you are the one who set them free. You are the one who opened the door." Max recoiled as one of the souls reached out to him, its fingers like cold, dead tendrils wrapping around his wrist. He tried to pull away, but the grip was unyielding, and the pressure inside him surged once more, like a wave crashing against the shore. His chest tightened as the abyss squeezed tighter around him. "Let go," Max gasped, his voice hoarse, barely more than a breath. I can't keep it. I don't want this." But the soul didn't let go. It pulled him toward the darkness, toward the creature, its grip like iron, its twisted form pulling him into the void. The creature stepped closer, its massive, shadowed form towering over Max. It loomed like an endless, black chasm, its eyes burning with a cruel light, and its lips curled into a smile. You still think you can escape, Max? You still think you can fight it? Max's vision flickered as the ground beneath him continued to crumble. The black sky overhead seemed to spiral, as though the very fabric of existence was tearing apart. He could feel the souls, those wretched, tortured things, surrounding him, reaching for him, pulling at him. He could hear their voices, louder now, all around him, their agonized wails merging into one single, maddening crescendo. The abyss was inside him. The abyss was him. Max's mind felt like it was shattering. The pain was so intense now, it was hard to think, hard to breathe. The darkness was everywhere. It was in his blood, in his bones. It was taking him over, filling him up until there was nothing left of who he had once been. And then, through the haze of madness, Max heard something small, something distant. A whisper. You can still fight. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. That voice. It wasn't the creatures. It wasn't the souls. It was his own voice. Max gritted his teeth, struggling against the overwhelming tide of darkness. He could feel the abyss wrapping tighter around his mind, threatening to swallow him whole. But in the back of his mind, that voice echoed once more. You can still fight. Max's eyes snapped open, his chest heaving with desperate breath. His hand, still gripped by the twisted soul, trembled, but something shifted inside him. A spark of defiance, a glimmer of his former self, pushed against the overwhelming force of the void. He didn't know if he could fight it, if he could truly escape the abyss that had consumed him. But one thing was clear. He wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Max's pulse raced, a drumbeat that seemed to echo through the chaos around him. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, of agony, but deep inside, beneath the overwhelming weight of the abyss, there was something, a flicker, of his old self, of the person he had been before the void had consumed him. That spark, that thread of humanity, was all that was left, clinging to him like a lifeline in the crushing darkness. The soul's grip tightened, cold fingers sinking into his wrist like ice. The creature loomed above him, its shadow swallowing the ground beneath their feet. The storm raged, lightning slashing across the sky in violent arcs, and the world felt as though it were collapsing, disintegrating under the weight of what had been unleashed. The abyss pressed down on him from all sides, filling the air with an unnatural cold, a suffocating pressure that made it hard to breathe, hard to think. It was a force that wanted him to break, to surrender, to give in. You still think you can fight, Max? The creature's voice rumbled, cruel and mocking as it loomed closer, its eyes glowing with a fiery, unholy light. You are mine now. The abyss is your master. There is no escaping it. There is no way out. Max's heart beat in his chest like a drum, each thundering pulse a reminder of what was at stake. He could feel the abyss closing in, suffocating him, wrapping its tendrils around his soul. He could feel it, the hunger, the emptiness, the darkness that wanted to consume him completely. But beneath it all, there was a flicker, a tiny spark of resistance that refused to be snuffed out. He pulled at the soul's grip with all the strength he could muster, forcing himself to focus, to fight. The darkness within him surged, whispering promises of power, of eternal domination, but he pushed it back. He had to push it back. No, Max gasped, his voice raw and strained but defiant. I won't let you take me. I won't let the abyss consume me. I won't become like them. His hand was shaking, but it reached for the soul's grip, his fingers pressing against its cold, unyielding skin. The soul recoiled for a moment, its twisted form flickering, as though it were startled by his defiance. But it quickly recovered, its clawed fingers tightening once more, pulling him closer to the void. Max could hear its voice in his mind, screeching, pleading, its agony now mingling with the abyss itself. We are one now, Max, the creature crooned, its voice low and seductive, wrapping around his mind like a poisonous vine. You cannot fight what you have become. You cannot fight what you have released. The abyss is inside you. It will always be inside you. There is no escape from this. Max felt a tremor run through him. The darkness was so close, so suffocating. It felt as though the very air around him was turning to stone, pressing in from all sides. The souls, those tortured, twisted things, were all around him now, their hollow eyes locked onto him, their mouths open in silent screams. He could feel them, feel their hunger, their desperate need to be free. And then something deep inside him stirred. The spark, the thread of resistance. It flickered once more, growing stronger, brighter, as if in defiance of everything the abyss represented. Max's breath came faster, his heart pounding in his chest as the darkness pressed against his mind, clawing, tearing, trying to break him. But this time he didn't let it. This time he fought. I'm not you. he whispered to the abyss, his voice barely audible, but filled with a force that surprised even him. I'm not what you made me. I'm not a part of this. The ground beneath him cracked open, and the wind screamed like 1,000 lost voices, but Max didn't flinch. His body trembled, his knees threatening to buckle beneath him, but he stayed on his feet. His hands, cold, trembling, gripped the soul's wrist, pulling it away from his arm. It resisted, but Max was stronger now, drawing on whatever strength he could find within himself. And then, with a violent push, he ripped his arm free. The soul shrieked in pain, its form warping and twisting like smoke, but Max didn't stop. He pulled it away from him, pushing it back into the void that had birthed it. The darkness lashed out at him, tendrils of shadow reaching for his skin, but he fought them back, his mind screaming with determination, with defiance. No, he shouted, his voice breaking through the storm, a battle cry against the abyss. I'm not yours. I won't become one of you. The void howled in fury, the air thickening with a force that threatened to crush him, but Max held his ground. He could feel it, the power of the abyss, the power he had once embraced, but now it felt like a weight, like a curse. The darkness had been his master once, but not anymore. He had crossed a line, he had made a choice, and no matter the cost, he wouldn't let the abyss claim him again. The souls, those twisted remnants of the lost, were still screaming, their voices rising in a chorus of madness, but Max turned his focus away from them. He could feel their hunger, their pain, their endless thirst for release, but he had to choose. You are not me, he repeated, his words slow and deliberate, as if carving them into his very soul. I will never be like you. And then, as if to punctuate his defiance, Max slammed his hand against the rift, pushing against the darkness with all his strength. The air seemed to crack and split, the winds howling in protest, but Max didn't stop. He pressed harder, forcing the rift to close, to recede. For a moment it felt like nothing had changed. The abyss raged, the storm howled, and the soul screamed, but then, something shifted. The rift trembled, its edges curling back, like a wound being stitched closed. The black rain, that suffocating, poisonous downpour, began to slow. The darkness retreated, pulling back from the world, leaving only the storm and the wind in its wake. Max staggered back, his body collapsing to the ground, his lungs burning from the effort, his mind spinning. But he didn't care. He had done it. He had pushed the abyss back. He had fought. For the first time in what felt like forever, the world felt still. The storm raged on above, but Max could hear nothing but the echo of his own breath in the silence that followed. And in that silence, a new realization washed over him. The battle was far from over. The abyss might have retreated, but it had marked him. He was forever changed. The rift was still there, still waiting, still alive. But Max had made a choice, and for now that was enough. Max's breath came in jagged, broken gasps, his chest heaving as if the very air had been stolen from his lungs. His body trembled, not from the cold, but from the sheer weight of what he had just done, and what it had cost him. The storm raged above, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, it felt distant, almost secondary to the immense pressure still weighing down on him. The abyss had retreated, but its presence was still inside him, like a wound that refused to heal. He staggered to his feet, his knees weak and unsteady, his vision swimming with black spots. The ground beneath him had cracked open, the earth twisted and broken from the force of the rift, and the remnants of the void still lingered in the air, thick, oppressive, as if the world itself were still holding its breath. Max wiped the rain from his face, his fingers trembling, still raw from the contact with the darkness. The black rain had stopped, but the sky above remained a swirling mass of storm clouds, the air thick with an unnatural chill. The wind howled, but it no longer felt like it was coming from a living, breathing beast. It felt hollow, empty, as though even the winds had been touched by the void. For a moment, Max just stood there, blinking into the darkness, trying to steady himself, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His mind was a maze of fragmented thoughts, a kaleidoscope of images that didn't seem to fit together. The souls, those tortured, twisted things, were gone now. The abyss had retreated, but they had left their mark on him, an imprint that felt as permanent as the earth beneath his feet. He glanced around at the shattered landscape. The trees, once towering and proud, were now twisted and blackened, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The earth was cracked and scarred, the chasm from which the void had spilled still gaping wide. The world felt as though it were holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for him. The creature was gone. He hadn't seen it leave, but he could feel its absence like a weight lifted from the air. It had been a force, a dark presence that had shaped his fate, but it was no longer there to guide, or torment him. Still, he knew it hadn't truly left. The abyss had marked him, carved itself into his very soul, and no matter how far he ran, no matter how hard he tried to escape, it would always be there, lurking just beneath the surface. Max swallowed hard, his throat dry, the taste of the darkness still lingering on his tongue. He could feel the emptiness in him now, the hollow space that the abyss had created inside him. It wasn't power. It wasn't control. It was something far worse, a gnawing, relentless hunger. A need for something he couldn't name, something that would fill the void that now existed inside him. "You did it," a voice whispered in his mind, low and cold. It was familiar, but he couldn't place it. "You stopped it, Max. You pushed the abyss back. But you didn't end it. You can't." Max's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the horizon, but there was nothing. No figure, no shadow, just the fractured land and the dark sky. The voice, however, continued to haunt him, a presence that had wormed its way into his thoughts, a constant reminder that the abyss would never truly release him. "You fought the abyss, Max, but you are the abyss now. You can't outrun it. You can't escape it. It has become part of you." Max gritted his teeth, his hands curling into fists, nails biting into his palms. He could feel the presence inside him again, that thing that had been planted in his soul the moment he opened the rift. The abyss had changed him. It had taken root in him, its darkness spreading through his veins, infecting every part of him. It was as though the shadow of the void had been grafted onto his very being, and no matter how much he fought it, no matter how much he tried to push it back, it would always be there, whispering. The storm above him still churned, the clouds twisting and folding into themselves like dark, swirling tendrils. The wind picked up again, but now it felt like a warning, a sign. The void might have receded, but its mark was undeniable. Max wasn't free. He would never be free. His gaze drifted down to his hand, the one that had touched the rift, the one that had pushed the abyss back. The blackened, jagged lines that had appeared on his skin, like veins of dark ink spreading across his palm, were still there. They hadn't faded. They wouldn't fade. It was as if the abyss had branded him, marked him as its own, and now, no matter what he did, he would always carry a piece of it inside him. Max's chest tightened as the weight of the realization hit him. He wasn't the keeper anymore. He wasn't the bridge. The abyss wasn't a thing he could control. It was him. He had been marked by it, and no matter how much he fought, no matter how much he resisted, he couldn't outrun the darkness inside him. "You can't escape the void," the voice in his mind murmured again, the words soft but certain. "It has always been a part of you. It will always be a part of you. You can only embrace it." Max's knees buckled, and he sank to the ground, his hands still trembling, still clinging to the remnants of the world that had once been. The abyss had been released, yes. He had stopped it for now. But in doing so, he had become something else. Something other. Something empty. The world around him, the broken landscape, the storm overhead, the twisted remnants of the forest, faded into the background as Max sat there, alone in the quiet aftermath. His heart still beat in his chest, but it felt hollow, like the beat of a drum that had lost its rhythm. The rift was still there, a scar in the fabric of the world, and Max understood now that no matter how much he tried to hide from it, no matter how far he ran, it would always be there, waiting for him. The abyss wasn't a force that could be stopped. It wasn't a power that could be defeated. It was inside him, and it always would be. For now the world was quiet, but the darkness would come again. It always did, and when it did, Max would be waiting.